Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Pirate. I will become stronger by checking in on the plot island. Chapter 81. Even Aokiji was a little surprised when he saw the boy in front of him who dared to say this to him. This was the first time he saw a pirate with a bounty of only 25 million dare to be so arrogant. Could it be that he is too easygoing and not as fierce as a kainu, so he has no deterrent effect? Just when Aokiji's thoughts were swirling, Sha-Chen across from him was the one with the ugliest expression. He glared at Smoker fiercely. You're not acting according to common sense when bringing in reinforcements, aren't you? Don't they always move reinforcements step by step, one level at a time? It would be better for you to just move the boss out directly. He just said that casually. I really didn't expect that a general would actually pop up. Although he was confident in his own strength, he was not confident enough to think that he could match a general. It would be fine if it was just him. He could definitely run if he wanted to, but the problem was that the bunch of little rookies behind him couldn't. What to do? After thinking for a long time, Sha-Chen didn't think of a good solution, so he had to ask tentatively, General Aokiji, are you here? I originally came here to have a meal, but now that I have met you, my plans may have to change. Hearing this, Sha-Chen's face looked as if he had eaten a dead fly, and when he looked at Luffy, he wanted to kill him. Tell me, why are you here when you have nothing to do? Isn't this just like serving meat to your mouth? But now that the matter was over, it was meaningless to say anything else. Sha-Chen looked at Aokiji again, and his whole aura changed instantly. A general is a general, don't be afraid. Let's go through a fight first. Sha-Chen stared at Aokiji and asked for the last time, are you sure to arrest us? Or else, just pretend you have never seen us and let us go. That's not okay, little brother. I won't be able to explain to my superiors if I let you go. Then there's nothing to talk about. In that case, let's have a fight. Sha-Chen said lightly. Today's battle seems inevitable no matter what. Then there is no need for him to talk nonsense anymore. Aokiji turned to Smoker and said, Smoker, go evacuate the crowd. I have a feeling that the next battle will not be that simple. Okay. Smoker nodded and immediately arranged for Dasky to evacuate all the surrounding people. Sha-Chen did not react at all to this move. Originally, he had no intention of attacking these civilians, but now that they have been evacuated, it is convenient for him to do so. Suddenly, Sha-Chen thought of something, walked directly into the kitchen of this restaurant, and collected everything he saw, whether useful or unused, into his system space. He likes things like 0 yuan purchases the most. Anyway, it will be destroyed in a fight later, so why not give it to him, at least it won't be a waste. When they came out again, they were the only ones left outside and Aokiji on the opposite side. For this world, if the strength is not similar, the term strength in numbers does not apply at all. Now Aokiji is standing alone on the opposite side, but he is exerting great pressure on their side. Sha-Chen walked up to everyone and said to Luffy and the others, you go first, Ace and I are here to stop them. But, Nami immediately wanted to say something when she heard this, but was directly interrupted by Sha-Chen. Hurry up. With your strength, even staying here will have no effect. Instead, it will hold us back. Moreover, Vivi's country is still in dire straits. If you waste your time here, who will help her? Sha-Chen. Vivi looked at Sha-Chen who said this and was in a daze. Gomo, rubber pistol. Just when Sha-Chen was about to explain something, he heard a familiar voice. In an instant, Sha-Chen had an unpleasant thought in his heart. Immediately turned around to look. And the fact was just as he thought, Luffy was punching Aokiji at this time. In an instant, the expressions on everyone's faces froze. What they just said about their feelings was all nonsense. Luffy, this idiot, really couldn't understand human language. Allah, little brother, don't be so grumpy. Aokiji looked at Luffy in front of him and said calmly. With a thought, the ice instantly invaded Luffy's arm, and had a tendency to spread to his entire body. Seeing this scene, Sha-Chen narrowed his eyes, appeared next to them in an instant, and kicked Aokiji. Aokiji was kicked away and flew backwards quickly, smashing through several houses before stopping. My hands, my body. A pig's cry came, making Sha-Chen feel a little helpless. Turning his head to look at Luffy, he saw him lying on the ground covering his half-frozen body and screaming at the top of his lungs. Seeing this situation, Sha Chen was immediately furious. He even told you to run away. You have to go up and test his level, right? Let me help Luffy bake this ice. Ace came over and said. Don't bother, Sha Chen said calmly. Then he grabbed Luffy's arm with one hand, and wrapped his armed haki around it. With a slight shock, the ice on Luffy's body began to crack inch by inch, turning into countless broken ice and falling to the ground. That's right, Sha Chen is using Lu Ying's haki. Relying on the flow of haki, Sha Chen can easily do this without hurting Luffy. Hey, the ice is gone. Luffy jumped up and moved his body vigorously, and said happily. Let's see if you dare to be so reckless again. Sha Chen cursed angrily. Then he said again, as you can see, your attacks are completely useless against him. Hurry up and escape with them. Okay, I get it. Luffy nodded. Due to the experience of being frozen just now, he is still frightened and has no idea of fighting Aokiji. I said. Can I let you go? Aokiji's calm voice came, and he looked at them intently. Then with a thought, the ice spread rapidly around him with him as the center. Everything he passed by was instantly frozen. At this time, Ace jumped out and shouted, Wall of fire. As soon as he finished speaking, Ace created a huge wall of fire, blocking the incoming ice. Let's go. Everyone who heard the shout again did not hesitate at all and ran back. Just like Sha Chen said, staying here now is a burden and they can't help at all. They said I would be in trouble if you left. Aokiji said calmly. Then he jumped directly into the sky. The cold air gathered in his hands and was aimed at Luffy and others who were escaping. Just when he was about to take action, a black fist dilated in his pupils and then knocked him away again. I also said, we will stop you. A faint voice came, and Sha Chen was seen turning into a demonic form at some point, staring coldly at Aokiji below in the sky. After a while, Sha Chen fell back to the ground. Ace came over and looked at him in surprise and said, I didn't expect you to be so strong. When he saw Sha Chen's 300 million bounty before, he did think that this person had some strength, but not very strong, but now it seems that this is not the case. Sha Chen did not answer this question, but asked him instead. Are you afraid of facing General Marine? Are you kidding me? I'm a member of the Whitebeard Pirates, the strongest pirate group in the world. Not to mention a mere Marine Admiral, even a Marine Fleet Admiral, I won't panic at all, okay. Oh, really? That's good, otherwise I'd be really afraid that you'd get hit and run away. You guys are looking for a fight, aren't you? Ace looked at him angrily. If we can escape this time, we can have a fight. Sha Chen replied calmly. Ha ha ha, well, it's settled. Ace laughed. You two little guys are very energetic. Aokiji slowly walked out of the smoke. The previous laziness on his face was gone, replaced by a serious look. Aokiji glanced at the two of them first, then focused on Sha Chen, and said with a little solemnity in his eyes. Boy, your understanding of armed domineering is very high. It can actually achieve the effect of internal destruction. Internal sabotage. Ace glanced at Sha Chen in surprise. If Aokiji didn't tell him, he wouldn't know it yet. Even he hasn't mastered this skill yet. And your haki is stronger than most of our Marine Lieutenant Generals. I'm very curious how you can cultivate your haki to this level at this age. Maybe it's talent, Sha Chen replied casually. But unexpectedly, Aokiji nodded in agreement and said, there should be no other explanation except talent. In this case, it seems that I have to take you down no matter what, otherwise we, Marine, will have trouble sleeping and eating because you are such a talented pirate. If you can do it, then try it. Sha Chen said, and then the iron rod appeared in his hand instantly. Aokiji raised his arms upwards, and gradually turned into ice cubes facing them as he raised them. Ice cube violent pheasant mouth. In an instant, a huge ice bird stretched out from Aokiji's hand, and then rushed towards them at great speed. Sha Chen picked up the iron rod and was about to smash the ice bird into pieces when Ace stood in front of him. Let me. Mirror fire flame. A large amount of flames instantly shot out from Ace's arms and collided with Aokiji's violent pheasant mouth. After continuing to fight against each other for a period of time, the moves of the two people disappeared. Aokiji looked at Ace and murmured, is he the captain of Whitebeard's 2nd Division? He is also a difficult person to deal with. Sha Chen clenched the stick in his hand, and his armed domineering energy instantly wrapped around it. Ace, come on. After the words fell, Sha Chen rushed out instantly. At the same time, Ace was not to be outdone and also rushed towards Aokiji. Looking at the two people rushing towards him, Aokiji's expression did not change at all. He placed one hand across his chest and opened his lips lightly. Ice skates. Aokiji raised the ice blade in his hand and faced Sha Chen's stick. The moment the two came into contact, a powerful wave spread from the place where the two met to the surroundings. Several huge cracks appeared in the surrounding houses in the aftermath. At this time, Ace had already rushed in front of the two of them and shouted loudly, "Sha Chen, get out of the way." Sha Chen, who heard Ace's voice, didn't hesitate at all and hurriedly stepped aside. As soon as Sha Chen got out of the way, he heard Ace's voice. Sacred Fire Shiranui. Two huge flame spears hit Aokiji directly, and the powerful impact pushed his body back, collapsing an unknown number of houses along the way. What should I say? This move of mine is quite powerful, isn't it? Ace came over and said happily. It's indeed quite big, but it's probably useless. Sha Chen replied calmly. Sure enough, in less than a second, Aokiji turned into ice again and appeared in front of them. There were no signs of injury at all. Seeing this scene, Sha Chen also shook his head. It would be troublesome to fight against such a Logia opponent with top knowledge and skills. That part of the body has been elementalized before the attack even arrives, so even if they have domineering power, they can't hit them. It seems that it is still unexpected. Just when Sha Chen was still thinking about how to break the situation, Aokiji's faint voice came. Don't be distracted, frozen time capsule. Two cold air projectiles were shot from Aokiji's hands and flew toward them at high speed. Sha Chen and Ace flew into the sky together without any hesitation. Bang! The moment the cold air projectile hit the ground, an extremely strong cold air emitted from it, freezing everything around it. Meteor, fire ring, fire pillar. The three of them fought fiercely together again. After some time, Ace and Sha Chen gasped for air together. During the period just now, they didn't hold back at all, using various big moves in turn. So now even with their monster-like physical strength, they can't help but feel a little tired. Moreover, they had already lost some glory at this time. Compared to the opposite Aokiji, who was just panting slightly but not injured at all, they were already at a disadvantage. Aokiji stood still slightly, his aura constantly gathering. Seeing this scene, Sha Chen knew that he was going to use his big move. He quickly made a defensive posture and stared at Aokiji. Sure enough, when the momentum gathered to a certain moment, Aokiji faintly uttered a few words from his mouth. Ice Age. In an instant, Sha Chen felt an extreme sense of danger and immediately wanted to escape from this place. But Aokiji's move was not only extremely powerful, but also extremely fast. By the time he reacted and wanted to escape, it was already too late. His lower body had turned into an ice sculpture, as did Ace next to him. Even though he was already trying hard to release his fire, he was still swallowed bit by the ice. After a while, two lifelike ice sculptures appeared in front of Aokiji. At this time, Sha Chen, who was in the ice sculpture, found that although he could not move, his consciousness still existed due to his own strength. After trying a little bit to struggle, Sha Chen found that it was of no use. This ice is not the kind that Aokiji uses to freeze Ming Jie. This is ice created by Aokiji's ultimate secret, Ice Age. In terms of intensity, he didn't know how much stronger it was, and at this time, there was still an extremely strong cold air that was constantly intruding into his body, making his body stiffer and thus losing his ability to move. Aokiji slowly walked up to the two ice sculptures and said softly, "It's really going to take some tricks to deal with you two. But now, everything is over." Aokiji took out the phone bug from his pocket and didn't know why it wasn't damaged in the fierce battle just now. Just when he was about to notify Smoker to come over and clean up the mess, a faint voice sounded in his ears. Zhang Sanshi Yinraku. A stick suddenly appeared above Aokiji's head, causing his pupils to shrink suddenly. At this time, it was too late for him to transform into elements again, so he could only wrap his arms with armed colors and cross them across his head. Bang! There was a dull sound, and the ground where Aokiji was standing cracked like a spider web with him as the center. The entire ground was dented by more than 1 meter under the impact of this blow. Cough. Aokiji couldn't help coughing, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He looked at Sha Chen above his head with a puzzled face. Aren't you frozen? Who told you that I was frozen? Use your sense of perception to better understand what is in the ice cubes. Aokiji was slightly stunned when he heard this, and couldn't help but release his sense of knowledge and move towards the frozen Sha Chen. After a few breaths, a look of astonishment appeared on his face. Are you a clone? From his careful perception, Sha Chen in the ice cube had a strange aura. If he had to describe it, it would be that it lacked the aura of life. But this detail cannot be discovered without careful perception, which is why he didn't notice it just now. Bingo, that's right. Sha Chen snapped his fingers, and then Sha Chen in the ice began to disappear, and then appeared next to him in an instant. Sha Chen can directly recall and summon his own clone, and even if the clone is fatally injured, he only needs to withdraw it and release it again to be in full condition. This is why Sha Chen thought it was a magical skill when he saw it. The only problem is that each time you summon a clone, you need to consume a certain amount of physical energy, and the summoned clone is also summoned according to his current state. Is this the power of your devil fruit? What kind of fruit is this? It's the devil fruit's ability. As for the devil fruit, it's not convenient to reveal it. Sha Chen replied calmly. He will explain all the abilities that appear on him as devil fruit abilities, otherwise it would be impossible to explain them clearly. Then Portka's D-Ace is also a doppelganger. Oh, that's not true, he was really frozen. As he said this, Sha Chen walked up to Ace's ice sculpture, wrapped around Sheng Liuying and punched the ice sculpture in front of him with a domineering punch. There is no way, this ice is relatively hard, you have to use some force. Sha Chen punched it several times in succession. When the first few punches were thrown, the ice sculpture did not change at all, and not even the ice chips were knocked off. And when Sha Chen punched out his last punch, the entire ice sculpture instantly collapsed, revealing Ace inside. Seeing this, Sha Chen couldn't help but feel a little lucky. Fortunately, he got the high-level armed color hockey this time and mastered Liu Ying. Otherwise, he really wouldn't be able to do anything with this ice. After coming out, Ace moved his hands and feet. Although he was not frozen for a long time, the biting cold air at that moment still made him feel a little uncomfortable. Ace leaned close to Sha Chen's ear and whispered to him, Luffy and the others have almost escaped now. I think we can just run away depending on the situation. We can't beat him. Ace still has a clear understanding of his own strength. If he can stop a general in a short time, he can indeed do it. But if you think about it for a long time, it is definitely impossible, so Ace already has the idea of running away, otherwise he will not be able to run if he runs out of energy later. Hey, can you discuss this in front of me so openly? Aokiji said dissatisfied. Ace was stunned for a moment when he heard this, and then said subconsciously, didn't I just whisper it in his ear? Aokiji said a little speechlessly, we are only less than 10 meters apart. No matter how quiet you say, I can still hear it with my sense of sight. Forgot, I lost it. Ace shouted, covering his head. Seeing this scene, Sha Chen didn't want to say anything anymore. You are the only one who still mocks Luffy as a fool every day. Aren't you still a fool sometimes? But it's definitely much better than Luffy. At this moment, Aokiji said, what you said really woke me up. If you want to leave, I may not be able to stop you. In this case, Ice Age. Hearing this familiar voice, the two subconsciously flew towards the sky, but Aokiji's goal this time was not to freeze them. The ice began to rise from the ground as it spread more than 1,000 meters, and then formed a huge cover that enveloped them all. This huge movement instantly attracted everyone's attention, including Luffy and others who escaped. Then, what is that? Sanji asked in shock. They saw a huge ice cover appearing in front of them. From their perspective, it even seemed to wrap up the entire city. Seeing this scene, Luffy couldn't help but shouted anxiously, Sha Chen, Ace. Then he immediately turned around and went back, but he was kicked out by Sanji as soon as he took a few steps. Sanji looked at him unkindly and asked, what do you want to do? I want to go back and save Sha Chen and the others. Do you think you can save them if you go back? They finally let us escape. If you go over now, their efforts will be in vain. Do you know what it means to be a general in our headquarters? Even Sha Chen told us to escape first when dealing with this kind of opponent. But you are not aware of the strength gap between Sha Chen and us. If you go back, you will definitely die. Sanji said everything he wanted to say and scolded Luffy. If possible, do they want to leave Sha Chen and escape first? It was because they knew that they were a burden to Sha Chen that they decided to leave without adding any burden to Sha Chen. After listening to Sanji's words, Luffy sat there in silence for a long time. After a while, he stood up and said, "Let's get on the boat and run." At this time, Sha Chen is here. Sha Chen and Ace both had puzzled expressions on their faces. Looking at the outside from their perspective at this time, it looked like a mosaic. Even the sun in the sky felt like a light bulb in their eyes. Seeing this scene, Sha Chen couldn't help but darken his face and looked at Ace unkindly. It's all his fault for speaking so loudly, otherwise Aokiji wouldn't have built such a big ice shield to prevent them from escaping. Feeling Sha Chen's gaze, Ace turned his head away embarrassedly. This wave is indeed his problem. But now it's useless to talk about this. How to escape is the problem. And now there is a problem before them, that is, because they are in this huge ice cover, the air cannot penetrate at all. So in other words, if you use more oxygen, you will need less oxygen. Speaking of this, Sha Chen always felt that something had been forgotten by him. What is it? Sha Chen thought hard and didn't react suddenly until he felt the heat coming from his side. He shouted hurriedly, "No! Great Flame Ring Fire Emperor!" In an instant, Ace created a huge fireball and threw it towards the ice cover. Boom! The moment the fireball came into contact with the ice, it first made a huge explosion sound, and then made a sizzling sound of the ice melting. When all the movement fell silent, the three people present felt like they had breathed a sigh of relief. And all this is because Ace's fireball just consumed a lot of oxygen, and the most important thing is that the ice cover has not been broken yet. At this time, Ace's eyes almost popped out when he looked at the gap in the ice cover, which was more than a few hundred meters deep. Then he asked Aokiji with an ugly face, "How thick is your ice cover?" "It's not very thick, just 2,000 meters. Aokiji replied calmly. 2,000 meters. Ace felt bad after hearing this. As for that, is it necessary? When Sha Chen heard this, he couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He was afraid that they would run away. If you trap us here like this, you will also be troubled by oxygen. Why bother? Why don't we go out and fight? Ace suddenly said to Aokiji. He really couldn't use it here. Any skill will consume a lot of oxygen, which is ridiculous. You are indeed right about this, but compared to you, I will be much less troubled. Life returned. As Aokiji finished speaking, his body began to change slightly, and his entire body swelled a little more than before. Then he looked at Sha Chen and the two of them and said lightly, "I have the skill of returning life and can control various parts of my body at will, so I can reduce my need for oxygen to an extremely low level. Now, do you still think that I am the same as you?" Hearing this, Ace's face darkened again, and then said to Sha Chen, "The current situation is very unfavorable to us. The problem of oxygen is..." Before Ace finished speaking, he saw that Sha Chen's body had also changed, and his body expanded a little like Aokiji. What is this? Return your life," Sha Chen replied calmly. "Ace, why do you two know this skill? Are you two working together? I was the only one who was affected by the co-authorship." Ace's heart was extremely unbalanced at this time, and among the three people present, he was the only one who had turned into a little loser. Aokiji on the opposite side was very shocked when he looked at Sha Chen and couldn't help but said, "I just saw you know the 6 styles of marine and I want to ask, why do you know the 6 styles of marine? And you can even master the return of life. Don't you know that? I'm extremely talented. Isn't it normal to be able to do 6 postures?" Aokiji's eyes turned cold when he heard this. "In this case, I can only ask you after I capture you in Push City." Yo, General Aokiji, I haven't even written my horoscope yet. Don't jump to conclusions so quickly. It's not up to you to decide whether you can catch me or not. After saying that, Sha Chen turned to look at Ace and said, "Wait a minute and I'll help you break through this ice block. Then you run away and I'll help you stop him. Can you do that? How will you escape later?" You don't have to worry about how I escape. Between two people, the stronger one will always stay and support me, don't you think? Ace was about to get angry, but he didn't know what to say. During this period of fighting, he really saw that Sha Chen was stronger than him. Not only that, he also has many more strange methods than him. Unlike him, he can do nothing but set fires. Thinking of this, Ace felt dissatisfied with his Xiao Xiao fruit for the first time, and an inexplicable sentence appeared in his mind. No dogs will eat the Xiao fruit. After thinking for a moment, Ace nodded and agreed to the plan. Seeing this situation, Sha Chen summoned a clone to stand side by side with him. Aokiji across from him narrowed his eyes when he saw this situation and became alarmed. He always felt that Sha Chen was going to hold back something big next. Sha Chen smiled slightly, looked at Aokiji and said, "Don't die with this next move." The two Sha Chens stood on both sides respectively, holding sticks in both hands and raising them high, and their momentum continued to gather. Not good. Feeling the power of Sha Chen's move, Aokiji quickly used Xiao to dodge. When the sinking power reached its peak, Sha Chen felt Aokiji's position and struck out the attack. Hi. The extremely powerful combo attack speeds towards Aokiji, much faster than he can move with shaving, and because the coverage area is too large, this move will definitely not be able to be defeated using elementalization. Boom! The attack hit the ice at the back, and the ice continued to shatter under this powerful attack, with countless ice shards flying. Afterwards, a hole was directly blasted out of the 2-kilometer thick ice cover. Walk! Sha Chen narrowed his eyes and immediately shouted. However, just as he was about to run away, a voice rang in his ears. "Didn't I tell you that I would be in trouble if you left?" When Sha Chen heard this, his pupils shrank instantly, and then he felt a sharp pain in his stomach, and then his whole body flew out instantly. Sha Chen, who was in the air, stepped on moonwalk several times and finally relieved the force. Then before he could recover, an ice blade appeared in front of his eyes and slashed towards him. Sha Chen quickly put the stick across his body and flew backwards again. When Ace saw this situation, he just wanted to come over and help. Sha Chen quickly shouted, "Let's go. I can think of a way on my own." After saying that, Sha Chen's clone dragged Ace and ran away using somersault clouds. In a critical moment, the only option is to give Ace some advantage and let him sit in the clouds. Aokiji did not stop this situation. Now in his opinion, the young man in front of him is the biggest threat. At this age, he actually has such fighting power. The attack just now even injured him, and it was caused by the aftermath when he briefly blocked the attack with an ice wall and then got out of the way. Thinking of that offensive move, Aokiji was still a little frightened. If he was accidentally hit by that move from the front, even he would be seriously injured. So in his current view, Sha Chen in front of him is the biggest threat. All Fire Fist aces have to be moved to the back. Of course, this is without him knowing that Ace is Roger's son. If he knew, it would be impossible to tell. Thinking of this, Aokiji's attacks became more and more fierce, and various attacks continued to hit Sha Chen. At a certain moment, Aokiji seized an opportunity and fired 2 spears towards Sha Chen. Sha Chen couldn't react to this blow and could only cover his body with armor in an attempt to block the blow. But it is a pity that Sha Chen's armament has not been as strong as it was at the beginning of the battle. The ice spear penetrated the domineering energy and inserted into Sha Chen's body, causing countless blood splashes. Sha Chen was also directly knocked away more than 10 meters by the power attached to the ice spear before falling heavily to the ground. Ahem. The moment he landed, Sha Chen spit out a large mouthful of blood. Looking at Aokiji walking towards him slowly, Sha Chen still asked with a smile, "Even in this situation? Is this your true strength?" Ahem. After saying that, Sha Chen vomited out another mouthful of blood, and at the same time, he felt a heartbreaking pain due to the wound involved. This Aokiji is so ruthless that he kept letting off steam when he beat Luffy in the original work. Is it possible that his old uncle Huang gave you a favor? At this moment, Sha Chen finally felt the pressure of a general. Now he also understands that Aokiji was just playing with the two of them that time, and his current strength is not at the same level as before, right? It made him think that he was not far away from the general just now. It made him swell a little more. As for now, All I can say is that what was swollen just now has all shrunk back. However, Sha Chen can accept this situation. If the general really only has this little strength, it would be really unreasonable. Sha Chen slowly stood up and pulled out the ice spear on his body. Then the injuries on his body recovered quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye. New granulations continued to grow from the wound, and after a while there was no trace of the wound on his body. Only the blood stains could prove that Sha Chen had been seriously injured just now. Although the defense of his current indestructible body is not enough to help him withstand Aokiji's attack, his recovery ability is still strong. It's just that recovering from these injuries will consume Sha Chen's physical strength, so Sha Chen's face is a little pale now, looking like a ghost. Seeing this, Aokiji looked shocked again. Animal-type abilities. Although it is a question, it is an affirmative tone. In Aokiji's knowledge, only the animal type can have this effect, and it must be a fantasy beast type. Sha Chen didn't answer, but looked at Aokiji with a smile on his face. A new round begins. At this time, the other side. Ace was stunned when he saw Sha Chen chewing a golden apple in front of him, and his eyes almost popped out of his head. Aren't you a clone? After hearing this, Sha Chen's clone raised his eyebrows and said calmly. What? The clone has no human rights. Can't even chew an apple. Ace, is this what I want to say? What I want to ask is why don't you help your body? There is no real body. Each of my clones is directly controlled by my consciousness, so you can regard all of my clones as me. I must have my own plan to eat apples leisurely here, otherwise why would I be here? The problem is, if your real body is captured and you put seafloor stone handcuffs on it, won't you disappear? Well, there's no need to worry about that. I have my own way of escaping. Aokiji will never be able to catch me. Okay, let's go our separate ways here. I'm going to find Luffy and the others. Sha Chen said, looking at Ace. Together, I happen to be going to Yuba too. Ace replied. Blackbeard isn't there, there's no need to look for it. Sha Chen replied calmly. By the way, you remember what I told you before, you are no match for Blackbeard, so you'd better not go to him. Also, let me tell you something else. Blackbeard knows everything about you, so once you lose, there will be serious consequences. He was on our ship before and must know me very well. I know this, but it doesn't matter, right? Many people on the ship know me very well. Ace asked in confusion. I'm not talking about these things, but... At this point, Sha Chen's eyes narrowed, and then he spoke word by word. Your life experience. For a moment, Ace looked at Sha Chen in front of him, his pupils shrinking suddenly, as if he heard something unbelievable. Sha Chen ignored Ace's shock and continued. Do you know how much impact it will have if the identity of your One Piece son is revealed? You will be. I will always have only one father, and that is Whitebeard. Before Sha Chen finished speaking, Ace suddenly yelled. Seeing Ace's appearance, Sha Chen didn't say anything else, but looked at him quietly, then turned around and left after a while. As Sha Chen walked away, he said, the consequences have been told to you. What you do depends on you. By the way, I'll give you a taste of this too. A golden apple was dumped by Sha Chen to Ace. Eat it, it tastes very good. The most important thing is, if you eat it, you can live for 1,000 years. After saying that, Sha Chen walked forward while whistling. Ace looked at the apple in his hand, then at Sha Chen's back, and suddenly smiled. This guy. The perspective switches back to the city of rapeseed flowers. Bang! A figure flew out like a meteor and landed heavily in the rubble not far away. After a while, the figure struggled to sit up, but did not stand up. His physical strength had reached its limit. Yes, this figure is Sha Chen. Sha Chen coughed a few times and laughed looking at Aokiji, whose clothes were slightly damaged across from him. It seems I can still cause some trouble to the general. After saying that, Sha Chen lay on the ground. Although he was not injured, he felt that his physical strength was being drained. Aokiji walked over slowly, looked at Sha Chen who was lying on the ground and was breathing heavily, with a flash of admiration in his eyes and said, You are very strong, but at your age I am far inferior to you. Really, ha ha ha, it's such an honor to be praised so highly by a marine general. Well, I want to ask, if you enter Impel Down City, can you give me a better room? Sha Chen said with a faint smile, without any fear of being caught. Well, you have to discuss this with Warring States Fleet Admiral. That's it, that's fine too. Then after you catch me, are you going to catch others? Sha Chen asked again. No, Aokiji shook his head. Just leave the remaining pirates to Smoker. As for you, I happen to be in the nearby waters, so Smoker asked me to stop by and catch you. With you as a big fish, the other pirates are no longer important, otherwise I will be the one in trouble. Aokiji touched his head and said calmly. At this time, he fully demonstrated his lazy justice and did not want to deal with too many troublesome things. It turns out that this cute little Smoker came here to find you. You are really brave. It seems that if you can escape in the future, you will have to take good care of him. Don't worry, you won't have this chance. As he said this, Aokiji took a pair of seafloor stone handcuffs from somewhere and put them on Sha Chen's hands. Sha Chen immediately pretended to be weak. It's just acting, who can't do it? After some time, Smoker brought a group of people here, and then they saw a scene that made them unbelievable. Sha Chen, a pirate, and Aokiji, a marine general, were sitting on a big rock chatting happily. If it weren't for the fact that Sha Chen still had a pair of seafloor stone handcuffs on his hand, they might have thought that Sha Chen had joined marine or Aokiji had joined pirates. Smoker came to Aokiji and asked, General Aokiji, what are you doing? Oh, brother Sha Chen is very interesting to talk to. It's a pleasure to chat with him. Yes, Uncle Aokiji is quite interesting, and the ice water he makes is delicious. Who knows how refreshing it is to drink a glass of ice water in a desert climate. Sha Chen shook the ice cup in the water and said. Everyone. 2 days later, in the desert on the Yuba and Yuyan routes, Luffy and his party were trekking hard at this time. So thirsty, Luffy said with his tongue hanging down. Yesterday, after they worked so hard to travel so far to Juba, they learned that the rebel army was no longer there, but had moved to a city called Catalia. Suddenly, everyone was confused. They were no longer here. So what were they doing these 2 days? Playing. Finally, after discussing for a while, everyone decided to go to Crocodile's base camp and go directly to find trouble with Crocodile. As long as Crocodile is solved, everything will be solved. So now they are on their way to the rainy land again. Under the blazing sun, Usopp couldn't help complaining, Sha Chen's absence is troublesome. Not only is there no food, there is no water, and there are no clouds. I have been really tired, hungry and thirsty these 2 days. After hearing this, everyone couldn't help but nodded in agreement. They were really not used to it for a while without Sha Chen. By the way, how do you think Sha Chen is doing? Vivi suddenly asked. In an instant, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly sank, and no one spoke. After a while, it was Luffy who spoke first. It will definitely be fine. It's not like you don't know Sha Chen's strength. He is so strong, so he will definitely be fine. But according to what you said, that Marine General is also very strong, and it will be very troublesome for Sha Chen to deal with it. Maybe Sha Chen is resting somewhere after defeating him with Ace. After Luffy finished speaking, no one answered him, and everyone remained silent. After a while, Nami smiled and said, Luffy is right, Sha Chen is so strong, he must be fine. For us, the first priority now is to stop Crocodile's conspiracy. Sha Chen will come back to us when he recovers from his injury. Yes, trust our vice captain, that guy is ridiculously strong. Zoro also said calmly. Yes, that's right, believe Sha Chen. Everyone nodded in unison. Let's go. Defeat Crocodile, Luffy shouted. Everyone also shouted. Down with Crocodile. After half a day, Luffy and others finally arrived at Crocodile's base camp, the Rainland. As soon as they entered the Rainland, everyone did not go to Crocodile immediately, but went to a tavern first. Luffy picked up a bucket and drank from it. He was really thirsty to death. The situation of the others was basically the same. They were all drinking water like they were trying to drink back all the water they had lost in the past few days. After drinking the water, Luffy let out a sigh of relief. This was the first time he felt that ordinary boiled water could taste so good. Okay, let's go defeat Crocodile. After drinking, Luffy stood up and shouted loudly. In an instant, everyone in the entire tavern turned their eyes towards him and stared at him unkindly. After a while, a man stood up and walked slowly towards Luffy, saying as he walked, "Who are you? What do you want to do to the hero of our kingdom?" "The hero of the kingdom? Isn't he a big bad guy?" Luffy asked doubtfully. However, his words directly ignited the anger of everyone present. They all stood up and roared, "Crocodile is the hero of our kingdom and has saved us countless times from pirates. You are unforgivable." In an instant, all the people rushed towards Luffy, looking like they wanted to eat him alive. Seeing this, Usopp and others next to him immediately tactfully left within 5 meters of Luffy, with expressions on their faces that said we didn't recognize him. "It's not you." Luffy's eyes widened as he watched the people around him disappear in an instant, but before he could even utter a word of condemnation, a person came to him and hit him hard in the face. Luffy instantly shrank his head to avoid these attacks, but looking at the crowd of people around him, he thought it would be better to run away first. When he ran to the door, he suddenly saw Zoro and others standing there with no concern in his peripheral vision. Instantly, he felt unbalanced. "So, Zoro, why are you still standing here? Let's run together." Luffy said this brightly, and then quickly ran outside. However, after hearing Luffy's words, Zoro and the others' expressions instantly changed as if they had eaten something. Then they turned their heads stiffly, and sure enough they saw the crowd staring at them angrily. Once Luffy runs away, the firepower will naturally be borne by their companions. "Run, run," Usopp shouted. Then the first one rushed out. Then everyone ran out together, and a group of people behind them were also chasing after them. At this moment, there was only one thought in their minds. "Luffy, you must kill him." Ha, ha. In a dark place in the town, a group of people were breathing heavily. "These people are really good at running," Nami said, panting with his hands on his knees. "Indeed, even someone as capable as me can't stand it." Usopp said the same. "It's all this idiot Luffy's fault. Didn't Vivi say it before? Now Crocodile is a hero in the eyes of the people, and he still says such things in public. The key is to support us." Quote. Sanji said with the same breath, but his tone was filled with anger towards Luffy. "Everyone, you are here." At this time, a voice came from a distance, attracting everyone's attention. When everyone saw this person clearly, sunny smiles appeared on their faces. "Yeah, we're here." Bang, bang. There was a continuous sound of hitting objects, accompanied by someone's screams, which gradually stopped after a minute. "I'm so sorry." Luffy bowed to everyone and apologized with a head that was at least 3 times too big. This time, Luffy was outraged. 5 people and a reindeer greeted him vigorously. Using their hands and feet together, they were all a bit weak. After resting for a few minutes, Nami stood up and said, "Let's go to the rain feast and find Crocodile." But she suddenly seemed to think of something, turned to stare at Luffy and said, "Luffy, if you yell on the street again, I think you know what the consequences will be, right?" Seeing Nami's gloomy expression, Luffy's body trembled for a moment and he hurriedly replied, "I know. I know." After a while, everyone finally arrived at the Yuyan. It looks like a casino, but is actually the headquarters of the Baroque studio. After the previous lessons, everyone was relatively more cautious this time, and they behaved themselves all the way here. The main thing is that Luffy behaves himself, so it's okay. "Come on, let's go in," Sanji said after taking a puff of cigarette. As soon as they entered the rain banquet, all kinds of shouting sounds filled their ears. What they saw was countless people shouting around different gambling venues. "Where is Crocodile?" Usopp asked Vivi in a low voice. "I don't know either." Vivi shook her head. Then he said, "This is also my first time here." At this time, in a corner of the casino, a woman wearing a hat was saying something to a group of middle-aged men. "See that group of people? Invite them to the VIP room." "But this is the boss's arrangement." The middle-aged man wanted to say something else, but the woman's words immediately shut him up. He could refute the woman who was the store manager, but he couldn't refute their boss. "I know." After saying that, the middle-aged man walked towards Luffy and the others. The woman, Robin, glanced at Luffy and the others again at this time. She breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that the figure that frightened her was not there. Facing him last time was so stressful. It seems that Aokiji really caught him. Robin murmured in a low voice. It didn't take long for the entire Alabasta to receive the news of such an intense battle breaking out in rapeseed flowers. Even Crocodile couldn't help but break into a cold sweat when he learned that Aokiji was here. He didn't feel relieved until he heard that Aokiji left by boat not long after. Afterwards, he also went to Rapeseed Flowers to see that the entire city was completely destroyed in this battle, and there were traces of ice everywhere. Even after being exposed to the sun for more than a day, the ice has only melted a little. This also made him clearly feel the strength of a general. With his strength, he was definitely no match. At the same time, he also became curious about Sha Chen, who could fight Aokiji. When he learned that he was also a member of the Straw Hats and had been defeated by Aokiji, Crocodile even wanted to thank Aokiji. Judging from the intelligence obtained during this period, he already knew that the Straw Hats were very hostile to him and were already on their way to stop his plan. It would have been a headache for him if the Straw Hats had such a powerful fighter, but now it's fine. Aokiji helped him solve this trouble. It seems that I can put in more good words for Aokiji at meetings in the future. Back in time, when Luffy and the others were still wondering where Crocodile was, the middle-aged man walked up to everyone and said to them, "Our boss is waiting for you in the VIP room over there." Everyone looked where he pointed, and saw a door with a gold frame appearing in front of them, with the 3 letters VIP hanging on it. And there were a bunch of welcome gestures at the door to welcome them in. "Hey, so arrogant, doesn't this mean you are telling us to come here?" Zoro raised an eyebrow and said, "Crocodile, I'm coming," Luffy shouted and rushed towards the door. "This idiot," Sanji couldn't help complaining, holding his forehead. "Let's go, follow Luffy." Zoro ran after Luffy. Then everyone followed behind and walked over. The moment they entered the door, they were greeted by a long passage. At the end of the passage, there were 2 signs. One says VIP and the other says Pirates. "Should we go VIP or Pirate?" Usopp asked doubtfully. "We are pirates, so of course we should follow the pirate path." Luffy answered directly without thinking. "You idiot pirate, this looks like a trap." "Okay," Sanji said angrily. "No, I'm going to take the pirate's road." After saying that, everyone came to the end of the road, and Luffy turned directly towards the pirate's road. Usopp and Zoro followed suit. "Ah, why is it a dead end?" Luffy asked in confusion, rubbing his head. However, before they could react, the floor under their feet opened directly downwards, and in an instant, Luffy and the 3 of them fell in. Sanji and others at the back were still on top because they ran too slowly and did not reach that position. Seeing this, Sanji hurriedly shouted, "Luffy, catch me." Oh, at this time, Luffy finally reacted after experiencing a period of weightlessness. He stretched out his left hand to wrap around Zoro and Usopp, and stretched his right hand directly upward towards Sanji. "Ha ha ha, it's so dangerous," Luffy said with a laugh after coming up. Little did he know that there was a fist behind his head ready to strike. Bang! Luffy punched Nami again. "I told you to be on the safe side. You still have to choose a pirate, you can be fooled by such a simple trap." "Okay, let's go to the other side. Please note that although the other road is clearly a trap, there is no guarantee that this road will be safe. So, we have to be careful." After that, Nami looked at Luffy and said, "Go ahead and explore the way." Oh, good. Then a magical scene happened. Luffy was walking in front alone, and the people behind him were at least 10 meters away from him. The main theme is a dead Taoist friend who is not dead but a poor Taoist. The captain is just selling it. However, there were no accidents along the way. They passed through the passage smoothly and came to a huge underground room. The room has a conference table and multiple chairs. At this time, a slightly hoarse male voice came from the front. "I didn't expect you to be quite smart and didn't fall into the trap I set." After the words fell, the chair in the front slowly turned around, and a man wearing a black cloak with a stitch mark on his face was sitting there with his legs crossed. "Crocodile." The moment she saw this man, Vivi said with an ugly expression. "Oh, Princess Vivi, why are you looking at me with such hostility? Did I do something to offend you? Crocodile, are you still acting now? I have already investigated everything. The natural disasters, rebellions, and dancing fan incidents that have occurred in Alabasta over the years are all due to you. Why are you doing this to Alabasta? Have we ever offended you?" Vivi roared loudly, her tone containing hatred for Crocodile. Ha ha ha. Crocodile suddenly laughed when he heard this. What's so funny? Vivi said angrily. Isn't it funny? Don't you think it's funny to see you being fooled around by me like a fool? Yes, I did all these things, and I also manipulated the conflict between the king's army and the rebel army. It's no wonder that your people don't believe in your dear father, the king of Alabasta. As for why I do this, ha ha ha, I just can't stand those hypocrites who pretend to be kind, so I want to bring down your father. What do you think? Is this reason enough? Ha ha ha, you. Vivi gritted her teeth. Just then, Luffy spoke. Crocodile, right, I'm going to blow you away. After saying that, Luffy rushed directly towards Crocodile. Wait, Luffy, Zoro shouted hurriedly, but it was no use. I couldn't help but curse secretly. This idiot. Luffy used his shave to get close to Crocodile, but he still had that indifferent smile on his face. Rubber pistol. Luffy punched Crocodile directly in the face, but it had no effect and penetrated directly through his body. Immediately afterwards, Crocodile's hand appeared in front of Luffy and strangled his neck. Straw Hat Boy, I have killed batch after batch of idiots like you. Having said that, Crocodile activated his fruit power, and in an instant, Luffy's body shriveled up at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon he was doing it alone. Then he was thrown back by Crocodile. Luffy. Sanji jumped and caught the flying Luffy, but at this time, Luffy's eyes were already a little distracted, and his whole body was light and airy. Give Luffy some water, Vivi shouted loudly. Then everyone hurriedly poured the water they carried on Luffy's body. Crocodile had no intention of stopping them. In his opinion, ants are ants after all. Crushing him to death several times is the same as crushing him to death once, and it doesn't take much effort at all. After a while, Luffy's body began to slowly change back to its original appearance after absorbing the water. Next second, Luffy did a sit-up and instantly sat up, breathing in air. It was so dangerous, I almost thought I was going to die. Did it take just one move to kill Luffy? Zoro said solemnly. Of course, ha ha ha, Crocodile laughed again, because you and I are not the same level of pirates. If that demon King Sha-Chen is on your ship, I might be a little afraid of you, but just you. A group of unknown people who don't even know the colors of their weapons want to defeat me. Stop talking nonsense. Sha-Chen will be here soon, don't be complacent. When he comes, he will beat you to the ground. Usopp shouted without confidence. Unexpectedly, Crocodile couldn't help laughing again when he heard this. Ha ha ha, you don't know, right? Sha-Chen on your ship has been defeated by Aokiji, and he has been gone for a few days now. After a while, you may receive news that he has been imprisoned in Impel Down City. Oh, no, you will never see that day again, because you will all die here today. What? Everyone had expressions of disbelief on their faces when they heard the news. Sha-Chen. How is that possible? Nami stuttered, unwilling to believe this fact. Sha-Chen is so strong, how could he be defeated? You must be lying to us. Luffy, who had recovered at this time, also shouted. Why do I need to lie to you? Crocodile spread his hands. You nameless people really don't know what level of power General Marine is. That's not something that just any cat or dog can deal with. Everyone who heard this couldn't help but fell silent at this time, and the expressions on their faces began to become extremely ugly. In fact, they had already made some speculations since Sha-Chen had received no news in the past few days, but they just didn't want to believe this fact. Even now that they have received the news, it is still a bit difficult for them to accept it. Sha-Chen is so strong, how could he lose? Everyone was silent for a long time, and then Luffy slowly raised his head and stared at Crocodile firmly. Then we will defeat you first, and then go rescue Sha-Chen. Ha ha ha, he is indeed a little pirate. He doesn't know how high the sky is, and he dares to say anything. Leaving aside the fact that you can't defeat me, do you know where Impel Down is? Just because you want to save people from there. Stop laughing so hard, Crocodile yelled out the last sentence. I don't care, I'm going to save you. Also, I will definitely beat you away. Luffy looked at Crocodile with firm eyes. As soon as he finished speaking, Luffy rushed towards Crocodile again and punched him again. Looking at Luffy, Crocodile, who had a short memory, he couldn't help but sneered, boy, don't you understand? You can't touch. PFF'd. Before Crocodile could finish speaking, he received a heavy blow to the stomach and was knocked straight out, hitting the wall behind him. Crocodile stood up immediately after falling to the ground, looked at the water droplets on Luffy's hand and said with a gloomy look, "I didn't expect that by accident, you would know the secret that water can touch me. I see, that's why you want to take away everyone's rain. Just because it's a way to restrain you," Vivi said in surprise. "This way they can also cause damage to Crocodile. Everyone, hurry up and sprinkle water on yourself." Nami turned to everyone and shouted loudly. In an instant, everyone sprinkled the remaining water on themselves. Then everyone stared at Crocodile with confidence. Crocodile looked at the situation in front of him with gloomy eyes, but what Luffy said next made him feel like a clown. "Ah, so water can restrain you. I thought it was my weapon that hit you." After saying that, Luffy raised his arm, and the dark armor color on it looked so dark and shiny. Just like Crocodile's face now. Crocodile's face at this time really looked like he had eaten a dead fly, especially when he looked at the expressions of the group of people opposite him looking at him. "Oh, I didn't expect that Master Shichibukai turned out to be a good person. He was afraid that we couldn't defeat him, so he told us his weaknesses." Usopp said slyly, Indeed, he is really a good man." Everyone echoed, their tone full of ridicule for Crocodile. Then everyone looked at Luffy again. Zoro looked at the armed haki in Luffy's hand and said sourly, "I didn't expect you to master the armed haki first. I'm obviously just a little closer. Ha ha ha, isn't it normal for me to be stronger as a captain?" Luffy came over and happily patted Zoro on the shoulder and said with a smile, "It's okay, relax, maybe you will master it naturally someday. I only broke through the critical point after being sucked dry by him just now. When we fight him later, you may be able to master it naturally if you chop him a few times." "Huh, that makes sense." Zoro's eyes lit up when he heard this. He pulled out the knife from his waist and stared at Crocodile. At the same time, other people were also staring at him eagerly, looking at an experienced monster. This made him feel very unhappy. "A bunch of brats dare to challenge me. You are really looking for death. Desert Diamond Sword." As Crocodile finished speaking, his hand suddenly moved downward. In an instant, several sand blades attacked Luffy and others. Everyone was frightened by the incoming sand blade and fled away one after another. However, after crossing them, the sand blade slashed towards the wall behind them. In an instant, the entire wall was divided into two parts. Since this place is in a huge pool, as soon as the wall cracks, countless water pours in. "Ha ha ha, you can be buried here as long as you are here." Crocodile laughed first, then his body turned into a burst of sand and flew toward the exit, disappearing from everyone's sight soon after. "Run." After some time, "Ahem, it was so dangerous, I almost drowned." Luffy turned over and said with lingering fear. Just now, because Crocodile's sand blade destroyed several walls at the same time, the water poured in at an unknown speed, and soon the entire room was filled. As a devil fruit user, he would naturally act like a loser when faced with this situation. If Zoro hadn't saved him, he might have died. After taking a break, Luffy couldn't help but curse. "That Crocodile, what, you miss me so much?" However, the next second he finished speaking, a voice came over, causing everyone lying on the ground to stand up instantly. Everyone looked up and saw Crocodile standing on a rooftop looking down at them. He said sadly, "Your life is really big, even if you don't die. Ha, we won't fall until we knock you down." Luffy said calmly, then closed his eyes. Gradually, his right fist began to turn dark. It is the domineering look of armed color. Rubber pistol. Luffy punched Crocodile directly, but Crocodile just dodged Luffy's attack. Arc-shaped sand dune. Seeing the attack coming towards him, Luffy was frightened and hurriedly left the place with his shaver. When he saw this attack hitting the ground and directly eroding the ground into sand, he patted his chest in fear. However, before Luffy could breathe a sigh of relief, Crocodile's next attack had already arrived in front of them. Sandstorm. As soon as he finished speaking, a tornado of sandstorm hit them from the direction of Crocodile. At the beginning, it was only about the size of a palm. However, as the distance between them shortened, the tornado sandstorm became larger and larger, and by the time they were in front of them, it had become 5 or 6 meters high. Everyone was unable to dodge, and was directly swept up by the tornado sandstorm, heading towards the desert area. Bang! Ahem! This sand makes me feel a little uncomfortable. Usopp kneeled on the sand and coughed a few times and said, "Did this guy crocodile blow us all to the desert?" Sanji stood up and looked at the surrounding desert and said, "Yes, because I will use this place as your burial ground." Desert Sunflower. The familiar voice of Crocodile made everyone's hearts suddenly lift, and they also felt that the sand under their feet began to collapse. "Get out of here," Sanji shouted, but it was too late. The sand under their feet turned into quicksand like a whirlpool in the sea, pulling them inward. "Ah, what is this?" Nami shouted as she ran upwards, but even so, her body still fell down little by little. "Will we die if we get sucked in?" Chopper burst into tears. "It will definitely happen." Usopp was also scared to death. Ha ha ha. Seeing this situation, Crocodile laughed again. "You just become the wreckage of the sand sea here." After saying that, he looked at Vivi. "Princess Vivi, the rebels have gone to Albana now. What do you think will happen if I use some means to make them fight after I get there?" Ha ha ha. Bye. After saying that, Crocodile turned around and disappeared into a gust of sand before everyone's eyes. Crocodile. One day later, Albana, the royal capital of Alabasta. King Cobra sat on the throne with a solemn expression. Now the rebel forces have all gathered outside the royal capital and may launch an attack at any time. Cobra didn't know what to do for a moment. What's more, there is Crocodile behind the scenes who is manipulating everything and trying to subvert the kingdom. At this moment, a guard from outside hurriedly ran in. King, what's wrong? What happened?" Belle asked at the side. "The leader of the rebel army, Kosha, asks for an audience." After hearing the news, Cobra stood up immediately and said hurriedly, "Let him in quickly." Not long after, a young man with glasses and yellow hair walked in from outside. On the way in, his eyes were fixed on Cobra, never leaving. When he reached a position more than 10 meters away from Cobra, he stood still. Staring at Cobra, he said, "King, now that things have come to this, I want to ask you one last time, why do you do this?" Cobra shook his head and said, "I have never done that. I didn't know what it was about before, but now I know. Vivi gave it to me. You will understand everything after reading it." Quote. Vivi. Kosha's heart couldn't help but tremble when he heard the name, and Vivi's voice and smile appeared in his mind. Shaking his head to dispel the thoughts in his mind, Kosha took the letter written by Vivi from Cobra's hand, opened it and read it. After a while, a look of shock appeared on Kosha's face, and sweat fell unconsciously. This is. At the same time, in a house in Albana, senior cadres of the Baroque studio, including Crocodile, gathered here at this time. Crocodile's eyes darkened, and he kept tapping the table with his hands. After a while, he asked, "Is there still no news about Mr. 2? "No, boss, he seems to have disappeared from the world since you last sent him to the small garden, without a trace," Robin said from the side. "Is that so?" Crocodile fell silent again, and then his eyes turned cold. "In this case, if he comes back, there is no need to exist anymore. Treat him as a traitor of Baroque Studio and kill him if you see him." "Yes," the people below responded one after another. One of the women with blue wavy hair asked, "It's just that without Mr. 2's ability, it is inconvenient for us to pretend to be the king and intensify the conflict between the king's army and the rebel army. There is no need to worry about this. The conflict between the king's army and the rebel army has already been extremely huge. The pain that has accumulated in the past few years is not so easy to eliminate. You can find a few billionaire elders to pretend to be the king's army and attack the rebel army later. It will have the same effect and will not affect our plan. Your tasks have been assigned to you, now let us go to the final touches." After saying that, Crocodile stood up from his seat. "The kingdom of Alabasta is destroyed today. Albana, inside the city's huge clock. Mr. 7, I feel that the boss has given us a very important task. If we complete it, we will definitely get a big reward." A short, stumpy and ugly woman decorated with frogs said happily. You're right, miss. Father's Day. Our level will definitely improve after completing this mission." Another man, who also didn't look that good, replied. "When this huge cannonball is launched, everyone in the square will die with a bang. Ha ha ha. I believe that scene will be very beautiful, Mr. 7. Oh, how beautiful is it? Came a faint male voice. Isn't it nice to see a sea of fire? Miss. Subconsciously replied on Father's Day. Miss. Father's Day turned her head stiffly and looked at Mr. 7 and asked, Mr. 7, just now, were you talking? No. In an instant, both of them turned their heads and looked back, only to see two people standing behind them. One of them is extremely handsome, the other. Mr. 2, how dare you come back? Didn't you know that the boss has treated you as a traitor? After saying that, the two men immediately took out their weapons, looked at Mr. 2 and said with a ferocious smile, while completing the task, we were able to deal with a traitor at the same time. What reward should the boss give us this time? The extremely handsome man is naturally Sha Chen's clone. He has been on the marry these days and has not been looking for Luffy or the others. The main body has been captured, so we can't say that his clone is still exhausted, right? In fact, Sha Chen's main purpose was to let Luffy and the others experience themselves. During this period, due to his presence, Luffy and the others basically encountered no difficulties. Although Luffy and the others are now stronger than in the original work, they have not experienced the training between life and death. And taking advantage of this opportunity, just let Luffy and the others experience it. As for Luffy and the others, will they die? What a joke. The pig's foot halo is not a joke. But it's not like he didn't do anything in the past 3 days, at least he pulled Mr. 2 into their camp. After he told Mr. 2 all the evil deeds Crocodile had done, he added hundreds of millions of punches and kicks. Mr. 2 switched sides and joined their camp very well. Sha Chen turned to look at Mr. 2 and said, I'll leave these two losers to you. No problem, Xiao Chen, let the slave family handle it. Don't call me this name, Sha Chen said with black lines on his head. Okay, Xiao Chen, Sha Chen. After that, Mr. 2 walked towards Mr. 7 with what he thought was a dance move. Mr. 7 and the two looked at Mr. 2 who was getting closer and closer to them. Without hesitation, they pointed the gun in their hands at Mr. 2 and shouted, Go to hell, Mr. 2. As several gunshots were heard, several bullets flew towards Mr. 2. Mr. 2 looked at the incoming bullets without any panic. He twisted his body a few times and dodged all the bullets. How is it possible? Mr. 7 and Miss were shocked on Father's Day, and sweat could not help but flow from their foreheads. However, during this stunned moment, Mr. 2 had already arrived in front of them and said calmly, Do you know why my family is Mr. 2 and you are Mr. 7? Boxing technique. With 2 punches, Mr. 7 and Miss were knocked to the ground by Mr. 2 on Father's Day. These two are complete supporting characters in the original work, even Vivi can defeat them, let alone Feng Clay as Mr. 2. Looking at the two people who fell to the ground, Mr. 2 said calmly, Because the slave family and you are not on the same level. Sha Chen, why didn't I realize before that this guy is pretty good at pretending? Sha Chen slowly walked to the muzzle and looked at the shells inside, with a smile on his lips. At the same time, somewhere in the royal capital Albana, 2 groups are confronting each other here, with 7 people on one side and 4 on the other. Of course, the 7 people are Luffy and the others. The desert quicksand released by Crocodile yesterday gave them a hard time, and in the end they were able to escape despite all their efforts. As soon as they came out, they rushed towards Albana non-stop, and they had to stop the war before the conflict between the King's army and the rebel army. But they didn't expect that soon after they entered the city gate, they encountered a group of people blocking their way. This group of people is officially Crocodile's subordinates. Mr. 1 and his partner Miss Both Fingers, and Mr. 4 and his partner Miss Merry Christmas. Mr. 1 looked at Luffy and others in front of him and said calmly, This road is blocked. Zoro raised an eyebrow, and then the word, Wado Yimo, in his hand suddenly came out of his body. A swordsman cannot harm me. A flash of knife light flashed. Zoro had appeared behind Mr. 1, and the knife in his hand was put back into the scabbard. At the same time, a deep cut appeared on Mr. 1's body, and countless blood spurted out. Mr. 1. The remaining people in Baroque Studio shouted, with shock on their faces. Mr. 1 was the strongest among them, and he was defeated just like that. Not to mention they were confused, they were sweating profusely. Mr. 1, who was still conscious, was even more confused. He knelt down on the ground, sweating profusely. How could a swordsman be able to cause harm to me? That's because you didn't meet me, Zoro said lightly. Then he added another sentence. You dare to block our way with this strength. You are very courageous. Then he turned to look at Luffy and the others and said, Luffy, let's go, we don't have time to waste time with them here. Zoro, who had already been able to cut iron for a long time, has become much stronger after this period of training. In the original work, Mr. 1, the person who put Zoro into a difficult battle, is now a matter of one blow to Zoro. Nami also said at this time, Luffy, Sanji, you go to the palace with Vivi and the others first. The remaining 3 people will be left to me, Usopp and Chopper. Okay, Luffy nodded, and then the group ran towards the palace. After they left, the remaining people in Baroque Studio were still a little unresponsive, and even looked at Nami and others with a little fear in their eyes. Nami looked at them and said calmly, the 3 of us are the weakest on the ship. We are not like those monsters, so don't worry. Really. After hearing this, Miss pointed her fingers at the 3 of them, her eyes shining brightly. Real. Nami and the 3 of them all showed sinister smiles, and then walked towards them step by step. Chapter 91. Albana Palace. Kosha could not calm down for a long time after reading Vivi's letter. He did not doubt the authenticity of the content of the letter. In fact, like his father, he had always trusted the king and did not want to believe that the king would do these things. Otherwise, he would not have come to see the king before the 2 armies fought. After a moment of silence, Kosha immediately said to Cobra, in this case, I will inform the rebels now and tell them that this battle is meaningless. After that, Kosha was ready to go back and inform the rebels. At this moment, earth-shattering shouts and the faint sound of weapons clashing came from outside the palace. Is this? Kosha and Cobra had horrified expressions on their faces at the same time. Yes, this is the sound of the battle between the king's army and the rebel army, came an eerie male voice. Kosha and Cobra turned their heads and saw Crocodile and Robin slowly walking towards them. Crocodile still had that sinister expression on his face. Crocodile, they both exclaimed at the same time. Protect the king. Guards, Yaka shouted. The surrounding soldiers immediately stepped forward to block Crocodile. Another adjutant, Bell, asked loudly, how did you get in? Where are the soldiers outside? Oh, you mean them. Crocodile showed a smile on his face. It's all done by humans. What? Everyone was shocked. Then they all stared at Crocodile with expressions of choosing others to devour. Hey, don't look at me like this. There's no need to sympathize with them, because you will be like this later. You fool. Bell was furious, and then his body quickly transformed into a falcon form and rushed towards Crocodile. Why bother? Why are you in such a hurry to die? Crocodile said calmly, and then waved his arm. Arc-shaped sand dune. PFF'd. Bell was knocked back directly by the sand blade. At the same time, his body began to slowly wither in the air, and when he fell to the ground, he had turned into a human being. Bell, Cobra yelled. How dare you take Bell? Yaka was extremely angry, and his body gradually expanded and turned into a jackal form. However, as soon as he rushed forward, Cobra stopped him. Stop, Yaka, you are no match for him, Cobra said in a gloomy voice. Ha ha ha, the king is the king. Unlike these brainless idiots, I know that you and I are not on the same level. Even if you rush forward, you will only die. Yaka was extremely angry, but still did not lose his mind. Just like Crocodile said, the strength gap between the 2 of them is too big. To rush forward at this time would be to risk death. If he were alone now, he would definitely rush forward and fight to the death, but now that the king is still here, he cannot do so. Bell has fallen, he cannot fall again, otherwise no one will really be able to protect the king. At this time, Kosha looked at Crocodile and asked, Crocodile, are you responsible for all the problems in the kingdom? Are you talking about the dancing powder incident? Or the conflict between the king's army and the rebel army? Or the frequent sandstorms? If that's what you're saying, then it's all my fault. Including every sandstorm that hits Juba, I only need one sandstorm to fill up the sand that your father dug for several months. Isn't that interesting? Ha ha ha. After hearing this, Kosha showed an extremely shocked look on his face, and then stared at Crocodile angrily. It turns out you did everything. I'm going to tell the rebels now that this is all your conspiracy, and your plan will not succeed. Do you think that since I have told you all this, I will let you leave here? You will all die here. Of course, the king will die elsewhere. For example, where the historical text is located. Cobra's pupils shrank and he looked at Crocodile in disbelief. How do you know this? Don't worry about how I know it. Just tell me the history. Crocodile was interrupted by a roar in the middle of his words, with a shocked look on his face. This voice is. Crocodile turned his head quickly, a fist dilating in his pupils. Hit him hard in the face before he could react. With a swish sound, Crocodile's figure flew backwards at an extremely fast speed, and then passed through the wall and landed on the platform outside the palace. Luffy didn't pause after beating Crocodile away, and continued running towards the place where he fell, with Zoro and Sanji following behind him. And Vivi looked at Cobra in the palace, tears falling uncontrollably. Father, I'm back. Vivi. As soon as Luffy and others arrived outside the palace, they saw Crocodile standing up with his head covered. He looked at them gloomily. Straw Hat Boy, you have ruined my good deeds over and over again. I will kill you all today. If you can do it, try it. Luffy clenched his fists in a fighting posture. Zoro put on a turban and Sanji lit a cigarette. The next moment, the three of them rushed towards Crocodile at the same time, as if they had a tacit understanding. Looking at the three people rushing towards him, Crocodile showed no fear on his face. With a wave of one hand, a sand wall appeared in front of them. All three people's attacks were blocked by this sand wall. Immediately afterwards, a golden hook came out of the desert at such a fast speed that the three of them were unable to dodge and were directly knocked away. Desert Diamond Sword. Before they could land, several sand blades rushed towards them again. In desperation, the three of them kicked each other, barely able to dodge these sand blades. After landing, without any hesitation, the three of them rushed towards Crocodile again. Vivi and others also came out at this time. Cobra looked at the battle in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. What a fierce battle this is. Half of the palace was almost scattered by them at this time. Suddenly, Luffy punched Crocodile in exchange for injury, and Crocodile flew backwards, spitting out a mouthful of blood in the air. Seeing this scene, Zoro and Sanji didn't hesitate and rushed forward. Their knives and feet were now stained with water, so they could touch Crocodile. Ghost Slayer. First meat kick. The two attacks fell on Crocodile at the same time, causing him to spit out another mouthful of blood. However, he is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Spikes made of sand suddenly appeared under Zoro and Sanji. Tear. The sound of flesh tearing was heard, and large wounds were made on both Zoro and Sanji's abdomens. Ahem. After this attack, the four of them lay on the ground breathing heavily. The next moment, the four of them struggled to stand up at the same time, and then spit out a mouthful of blood at the same time. How about it, Crocodile, are we at the same level? Luffy grinned. Crocodile's eyes were gloomy. He didn't expect that he would be forced to this point by these three brats. But the next moment he suddenly thought of something, and a smile appeared on his lips. You just continue to mess with me here. Let me remind you that in less than 10 minutes, a cannonball will be fired into the center of the square. The power of the explosion is enough to have a diameter of 5,000 meters. You can imagine that the square is now full of royal troops and rebels. Once the bomb explodes, everyone will die, no one will be left. What? Cobra and others all showed horrified expressions. Vivi asked Crocodile loudly, where did you put the shells? Do you think I will tell you? Ha ha ha. Crocodile laughed, but before his laughter stopped, there was a sudden flash in the sky. Then there was a loud noise with a shock wave. Crocodile. Crocodile was confused, and everyone was also confused. Is that the cannonball you mentioned? Luffy asked blankly. It should, maybe. Crocodile replied uncertainly. Vivi and others showed strange expressions at this time. Just now they were worried to death, but in the end they didn't even have time to drink water. Is the crisis solved? Wouldn't it be a bit sloppy? But no matter what, at least the crisis has been resolved now. Vivi happily shouted. Although I don't know who did it, I really want to thank him. Crocodile's expression was completely different from Vivi's. At this time, his face was gloomy, his eyes were full of anger, and he shouted, Who did it? It's me. A faint male voice came. This sound is. The moment they heard the sound, Luffy and the other three showed excited expressions on their faces. They hurriedly turned their heads to look, only to see Sha Chen and Mr. Tu slowly walked towards them. Sha Chen. Luffy stretched out and rushed over to hug Sha Chen, his face bursting with snot mixed with tears. Hey, don't hug me so tightly, your snot is rubbing on me. After a while, Sha Chen finally pulled Luffy off of him. At the same time, Zoro and Sanji also walked over. Looking at Sha Chen, he asked happily, didn't that crocodile say that you were captured by Aokiji? How did you escape? Who said I escaped? Sha Chen smiled lightly. After hearing this, several people couldn't help showing doubtful expressions. Sha Chen did not show off and explained directly, I am just a clone now. My true body is still on Aokiji's ship. I have left Alabasta for a few days now. What? Several people were shocked. Then you still haven't escaped? Sanji said with an ugly expression. That's not what you mean. Have I ever told you that my body and clone can exchange places at any time? At this point, a smile appeared on Sha Chen's lips. You mean? Zoro seemed to have thought of something, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. That's right, I can now swap the positions of my clone and my main body. I haven't switched before just because Aokiji's ship hasn't gone far. If I switch and he notices it and comes back later, it will be in trouble. It's still very difficult for us to face Aokiji now. Once he comes back, it will definitely have an impact on our plan to save Alabasta. But I don't have this worry now. If that's the case, then I'll change back now. It feels weird to keep using my clone to walk around here. After saying that, Sha Chen closed his eyes. At the same time, somewhere on the sea area of the Great Channel, a marine warship is sailing here. Hey, Uncle Aokiji, help me chill it. Sha Chen walked up to Aokiji with a drink and said to Aokiji. Hearing this, a black line flashed across Aokiji's face. He hesitated to speak, and finally said nothing. He honestly released the cold air to help Sha Chen ice his drink. Sha Chen picked up the cup and took a big sip, making a refreshing sound at the same time. After drinking, Sha Chen lay on the chair and said comfortably. Uncle Aokiji, don't tell me, your marine's conditions are really good, it makes me want to quit. Hearing Sha Chen's words, Aokiji's eyes lit up and he said, if you have this idea, I can help you tell it to the Warring States Fleet Admiral, and you won't even have to be sentenced. During this time, Aokiji also learned some things about Sha Chen, and also learned that he had never killed a civilian. Such a high bounty was set because the scene of him and Hawkeye fighting was captured at that time. And during this period of getting along, Aokiji was also very optimistic about this young man. He had already had the idea of recruiting Sha Chen. Now that Sha Chen took the initiative, he was eager to let Sha Chen join them. That's why he gave Sha Chen great preferential treatment during this period, which was completely unlike the attitude he should have towards a pirate. Not only did he live well and eat well, but occasionally he, the Marine General, would personally ice his drinks. If the sea-floor stone handcuffs on Sha Chen's hands were removed, Sha Chen's life would be almost the same as his, and his life would even be better than his. Ha ha ha, Uncle Aokiji, I just said that as a joke. I don't want to be a dog to the celestial dragons. I feel sick when I see them. Aokiji's eyes narrowed after hearing this, and he looked at Sha Chen and asked, do you know what you are talking about? Of course, Uncle Aokiji, don't you think those pigs from the Tianlong people are disgusting? Aokiji did not answer. Although he did not have a good impression of those celestial dragons, world government matters were not something he could discuss. During this period of time when he became a general, Aokiji gradually understood why his former senior Garp had refused to be promoted to a general. Because after becoming a general, many things cannot be decided by oneself. Although the power is greater, the freedom is indeed relatively less. Thinking of this, Aokiji glanced at Sha Chen with a pity. When Sha Chen said this in public just now, it was no longer possible for him to join Marine. World government will not allow people like Sha Chen to enter their subordinate organizations. Hey, another good seedling is missing. Aokiji sighed inwardly. At this time, after Sha Chen finished his drink, he looked at Aokiji and said, Uncle Aokiji, thank you for taking care of me during this time. If it weren't for our different camps, I feel like we should be good friends. Sha Chen's sudden words made Aokiji a little confused, but before he could react, Sha Chen said again. Uncle Aokiji, let's practice again next time we meet. I feel like I won't lose next time. After saying that, Sha Chen showed a smile on his lips and stood up. What do you mean? Aokiji also stood up, staring at Sha Chen. Sha Chen did not answer, but said directly, Goodbye, Uncle Aokiji. As soon as he finished speaking, Aokiji saw Sha Chen in front of him flicker, and then the aura on his body changed, and then he disappeared directly. The only sound left was the sound of the seafloor stone handcuffs hitting the ground. Aokiji. The perspective returned to the palace, and Sha Chen looked at Luffy and the others after a flash, and said with a smile, Okay, I'm back. Hearing this, Luffy and others showed happy expressions on their faces. But Luffy suddenly thought of something and said hurriedly, By the way, Sha Chen, Crocodile, if you can't fight with us, he will let us fight him off. I had no intention of competing with you. Sha Chen spread his hands. Although the current Crocodile is much stronger than the original, it has not yet reached the level of the top war period. It didn't interest him. He had just fought against Aokiji and now he no longer had any thoughts of fighting against Crocodile. And it's mainly because the three Luffys are now much stronger than before, especially Luffy, who has mastered the weapon color, which can't help but make Sha Chen feel a little surprised. It seems Luffy's talent is still good. So even though Crocodile is stronger than the original, Luffy and the other three still have a good chance of winning against him. For example, right now, Crocodile's injuries were much more serious than Luffy's. However, these conversations between Sha Chen and Luffy made Crocodile on the opposite side completely angry. You really treat him as an experienced monster, right? Anyone can come up and step on him. Crocodile stared at Sha Chen and said, Are you the Demon King Sha Chen? Boy, how dare you speak nonsense here? Since Aokiji didn't catch you, let me kill you today. All of you will die here. After saying that, Crocodile slapped the ground with one hand, shouted. Erosion of reincarnation. In an instant, the ground dried up and all the surrounding buildings began to weather into sand. Seeing this scene, Luffy and the other three didn't hesitate and rushed towards him. Sha Chen. At the same time, a sound came from behind Sha Chen. He couldn't help but turn his head and look over. He saw Nami and three people running towards him and shouting excitedly. Hey, long time no see. Sha Chen smiled lightly, but something unexpected happened in the next second. Nami ran over and threw herself into his arms like a baby swallow returning to its nest, holding him tightly. At this moment, Sha Chen was stunned, holding up his hands helplessly, not knowing where to put them. After hesitating for a while, Sha Chen slowly placed his hand on Nami's back. But the next second, Sha Chen felt as if his chest was wet. When he looked down, he saw Nami's tears constantly flowing out. Sha Chen immediately panicked and asked quickly, What's wrong? What's wrong, Nami? I thought you were captured. Nami said sobbingly. Although she has always believed in Sha Chen's strength, this time she faced General Marine. Even though Sha Chen told them not to worry before, she just couldn't help it. After understanding the cause and effect, Sha Chen couldn't help but laugh, patted Nami on the shoulder and comforted. Okay, it's okay. How could I be captured by Marine? The Marine who can capture me doesn't exist yet. Besides, I can't bear to leave you behind. But, Crocodile said. Nami started to hesitate again. Can you believe what Crocodile says? Don't you know how good he is at lying to others? Even the whole of Alabasta is being played by him, what do you think? Don't believe it if you hear similar news in the future. I'm sure nothing will happen to me, you know. After saying that, Sha Chen flicked Nami's forehead. Nami groaned in pain, then buried her head in Sha Chen's chest again, and said in a low voice, I know. Hey, Chopper, Usopp, who was watching this scene, shouted to Chopper coldly. What's wrong? Chopper tilted his head in confusion. Little animals can't see this kind of thing, you know. At this time, the battle between Luffy and the others and Crocodile has come to an end. The four people were constantly attacking each other, and blood spurted out as if they were free of money. Finally, Zoro's direct sword style and Lion Song's silence took the lead. Sanji's various kicking skills followed up with control, and finally Luffy's rubber and storm dealt tons of damage. After a series of moves, the sand crocodile was sent flying more than 100 meters into the sky. A large mouthful of blood spat out from his mouth, and his eyes gradually lost focus. After a while it fell heavily to the ground. Crocodile, defeated. Seeing that Crocodile really wouldn't get up again, Luffy and the three of them also breathed a sigh of relief, and they all lay on the ground, breathing heavily. A smile appeared on Luffy's face and he shouted, "Win!" Luffy's voice infected everyone present. Vivi also hugged Cobra excitedly and shouted loudly, "We won, we won!" As for the soldiers next to them, they all looked like they had not yet reacted. They had all been mentally prepared to die. In the end, it was just a bit of soy sauce. At this time, Yaka was holding Belle, who was sucked in and tears were flowing down unconsciously. "Belle, did you see it? We won. Your spirit in heaven must be happy too." "Belle," Yaka howled in pain, but the sound that came next made him freeze in place. "Why are you crying? He's not dead yet." Sha Chen came over and looked at this scene and said helplessly, "It's just being sucked and killed by someone. In the original work, Luffy was sucked countless times." "What? Belle is not dead yet?" After reacting, Yaka asked Sha Chen in surprise. "Yes, you go find some water and pour it on him. He will recover naturally after drinking the water. The same goes for those soldiers who were sucked and killed." "Yes, I'll do it right away," Yaka said excitedly, and then went to find water. Sha Chen came to Cobra and Kosha and said to them, "Now Crocodile has been defeated, but the war is not over yet. I need the leaders of both sides to go over and explain the situation clearly to the soldiers on both sides and end this war." "Okay." Cobra and Kosha nodded together, and then they walked towards the palace square. Sha Chen also followed them. Although Crocodile has been defeated, there are still quite a few people in the Baroque studio under him. The big fish have already been taken care of by Luffy and the others, so let the little fish do it this time. Not long after, the group arrived at the palace square. Looking at the fallen people around him, Cobra was heartbroken, then took out his loudspeaker and shouted, "Stop!" The loud sound came, causing all those fighting to stop what they were doing unconsciously. Cobra then revealed to everyone everything Crocodile had done and his purpose. Later, Kosha also stood up to testify about the matter. For a time, all the rebels were confused. Their relationship has been fighting for so long, so it turns out it was all someone else's conspiracy. Then they don't call it an uprising, it's completely rebellion. It's just that Cobra didn't care about these things, but directly announced the end of the war and would not punish them. Upon hearing the news, all the rebels dropped their weapons. At the same time, it began to rain lightly in the sky. The moment the raindrops fell on their bodies, the emotions of all the rebels could no longer be suppressed. They all sat down and hugged each other and cried. Looking at this scene, Cobra and Kosha both showed happy smiles. However, at this moment, a cold light flashed, and hundreds of people with swords suddenly emerged from the crowd and rushed toward Cobra. Among them are the King's army and the rebel army, but they all have a common logo. That's the logo of the Baroque studio on the arm. "Come on, kill the king, and we can move to the next level." Seeing hundreds of people around him rushing toward him, Cobra had an ugly look on his face. The surrounding soldiers also made ready postures. Just when they were about to make a move, Sha Chen slowly walked up to them. Sha Chen looked at the people from the Baroque studio who were rushing towards him with an indifferent expression, without any intention of taking them to heart. But Cobra behind him didn't think so. He hurriedly shouted, "Mr. Sha Chen, step back and let the soldiers come. No need to bother, it will be quick." After saying that, Sha Chen's eyes narrowed, and Conqueror's domineering aura came out of his body. In an instant, all the people who came towards him lay on the ground motionless with their eyes white. "Done, call it a day." After saying that, Sha Chen walked towards the direction of the palace. But the others were dumbfounded by this miraculous scene, and they all fell over after just staring. Cobra said in horror, "What a terrifying power this is." After reacting, he looked around, his eyes filled with moisture. Everything was finally over. 1 day later, Albana Palace. "King, various reconstruction work after the domestic disaster has been implemented in an orderly manner under the guidance of Princess Vivi. Ikaram, the captain of the Kingdom Guard, said to Cobra. Yeah, Cobra nodded happily. Cobra was very reassured about Vivi's ability to do things. With her here, everything would be fine. Suddenly, Cobra seemed to remember something and asked Ikaram, by the way, how are the benefactors doing? Oh, they have been eating since they woke up yesterday, and Durakota said they were a little too busy. A smile appeared on Ikaram's face when he said this. Only, just what? Cobra asked doubtfully, looking at Ikaram's hesitant expression. It's just that the woman who was Crocodile's former subordinate, Miss Alsunday, is also with them. What? Why are you here? In the restaurant of the palace, everyone looked at Robin in shock, huddled in a ball, and assumed a fighting posture. Why can't I be here? Robin said with a faint smile while flipping through the book. Are you kidding? You are from Baroque Studio, a killer who kills without blinking an eye. Usopp said bravely. Don't worry about those details, that's all in the past. How could you not care? After some time, everyone calmed down a little. Nami crossed her chest and asked coldly, so, what do you want to do now? I want to join your pirate group, is that okay? What? Everyone who had just calmed down immediately stood up again. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Nami was the first to jump out an object. Yes, how can we let people who were enemies yesterday join us? Usopp and Chopper also shouted. Zoro remained silent, but it looked like he disagreed. On the contrary, my beautiful lady, you are most welcome to this ship. If you have anything to ask, please feel free to ask me. Sanji walked up to Robin and said gracefully. Thank you. Robin smiled. Sanji, idiot perverted cook. Zoro and the others cursed in unison. Robin then looked at Luffy again. Captain, what do you think? Oh, sure. Luffy nodded. Zoro, Nami, Usopp, Chopper, you don't agree randomly. Oh, Chopper, you are so cute. Robin continued. Even if you say someone is cute, they won't be happy, you. Chopper, killed in action. The quartet is now down to 3. Sha Chen, who was next to him, watched this scene with great interest. Originally, he was still wondering whether so many changes in the plot would affect Robin's ability to board their ship. But now it seems that there is no problem. Robin actually offered to board their ship, and he even knew how to defeat them one by one, which was kind of interesting. You have to give up. There is no way I will let you get on the boat no matter what. Nami said lightly, and then looked at Sha Chen. Sha Chen, please say something too. Me, I have no objection, Sha Chen said calmly after taking a sip of tea. How come even you? I have a bag of gems I got from Crocodile. Before Nami finished speaking, he saw Robin taking out a bag and placing it on the table, making a crisp sound when shaking. Seeing this, Nami walked over slowly, took Robin's hand and said seriously, please be sure to get on our ship. Zoro, Usopp, these guys who are not determined will have to rely on 2 of us to protect them in the end. Usopp's eyes narrowed slightly. That's right, Zoro replied. Hey, Usopp, Luffy suddenly shouted, and then 2 hands made from Robin's blossom fruit appeared on his head. I'm Chopper, ha ha ha, Zoro. In the end, Zoro was the only one left in the 4-person resistance group. Looking at this scene, he didn't say anything. Instead, he walked to Sha Chen and sat down, and asked Sha Chen. Why did you allow that woman to come on board? Why not? It's more interesting to have one more person, isn't it? Sha Chen replied with a smile. Hearing this, Zoro glanced at him suspiciously. He always felt that Sha Chen didn't tell him the truth, but the matter was over, so he didn't ask any more questions. Everyone on the ship has agreed, so why is he still insisting? Sha Chen was relieved when he saw that Zoro didn't ask any more questions. He didn't know what to say if he asked again. Should we say that Robin was originally supposed to be a member of this ship? How is that possible? So, this situation is good now. Benefactors, are you satisfied with your meal? At this time, Cobra, Vivi and Ikaram walked in from outside. Oh, it's delicious, thank you for the treat, old man. Luffy shouted loudly. That's good. As long as you are satisfied, I'm afraid the food we have here may not be to your liking. How could it happen? This chef's skills are very good. I want to meet him and compete with him on his cooking skills. Sanji said at the side. Oh, really? Which handsome guy wants to compete with me on cooking skills? A voice came, and then a person who had nothing to do with Ikaram but could only be said to be exactly the same came over. Two curly-haired uncles. Luffy's eyes widened when he saw this. No, this is Ikarim's wife, Miss Durakota. Vivi explained from the side. Everyone. What? There should be a limit to the relationship between husband and wife, right? Zoro said with a livid face. He found these two people to be twins far more convincing than a couple. Seeing that everyone was almost finished eating, Cobra suddenly suggested, if you are full, there is a large bathhouse in the palace. I wonder if you are interested. Big bath. Upon hearing this, everyone's eyes turned into starry eyes, looking very expectant. Inside the palace bathhouse, several men and a reindeer surrounded one person, with ugly expressions on their faces. Looking at the group of people staring at him, Sha Chen couldn't help but feel a little helpless. What are you doing? Why, you have so much money, Sanji said with an ugly expression. Everyone else had the same idea as Sanji. Looking at Sha Chen's and then comparing their own, a sense of gap arose. After a long time, Cobra looked at Sha Chen and said quietly, I actually feel, you are more suitable to be the king. Sha Chen. After the shock, everyone jumped directly into the bathtub and fluttered vigorously. After a while, Sanji suddenly asked Ikaram, do you know where the women's bathhouse is? I couldn't possibly tell you even if I knew it, fool, Ikaram yelled. Unexpectedly, Cobra, a perverted old man, shouted directly at everyone. It's behind this wall. Upon hearing this, Sanji immediately stood up in surprise and said to Cobra, you are so kind. As he said this, he prepared to go to the women's bathhouse to find out. At the same time, Luffy and others followed him out of curiosity. Seeing this scene, Sha Chen shook his head slightly and sighed. These people are really hopeless. Then a word came out lightly from his mouth. Certainly, the moment the words fell, the bodies of everyone around him were frozen in place and unable to move. Hey, these idiots, Zoro also sighed, but the next second, he found that Luffy and the others were all frozen in place, unable to move. I couldn't help but immediately became alert. At the same time, he also said to Sha Chen next to him, Sha Chen, have you noticed that Luffy and the others seem to be unable to move? Yes, found it, Sha Chen said lightly. I did it. This sentence directly swallowed the word, enemy attack, stuck in Zoro's throat. You did it? Zoro asked confused. That's right, I immobilized them all. This is my latest fruit ability. That's right, Sha Chen is currently using the body holding technique used by Brother Monkey. During his recent stay on the Aokiji ship, he studied devil fruits when he had nothing to do. Unexpectedly, he actually discovered something through his research. One of them is this body fixing technique, which can fix the target. The length of time it takes to stay depends on his strength and the strength of the opponent. If he wanted to deal with Luffy at his level, Luffy would be here forever. The other one is the water avoidance technique. This spell directly solved his problem of being unable to breathe underwater, and the spell he learned was even more powerful than the original version of Brother Monkey. In the original version, Brother Monkey was more evasive every time he encountered a situation that required underwater combat. Brother Monkey himself admitted that he was not very good at underwater combat when he was in Liusha River. The reason is that Brother Monkey needs to silently recite the water avoidance technique all the time when entering the water, which consumes his energy. It makes him unable to fight with all his strength, which affects his strength. But with Sha Chen's current water avoiding technique, he won't have this problem. He only needs to give himself a water avoiding technique when he goes into the water, and then he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. It's equivalent to paying once and free for life. These two skills are quite useful to him, especially the body holding technique. When fighting a strong person, suddenly causing the opponent's body to pause, this moment can determine the outcome of the battle. It is a small magical skill. Then Sha Chen stood up, looked at the people who were frozen and said, I will give you a little lesson this time, so that you can think of peeking at other girls taking a shower. You will maintain this immobile position for 3 hours, and it will be released automatically after 3 hours. During this period, you cannot move or speak. Okay, I'll leave first. You guys can slowly face the wall here and think about it. After that, Sha Chen wrapped himself in a bath towel and walked outside. Zoro also stood up at this time, walked around everyone, and then stopped next to Sanji. He mocked without mercy. Cook, how dare you be so perverted? Didn't you see that Nami and Sha Chen were hugging each other yesterday? Are you still trying to take a peek? Sha Chending, you are already late for 3 hours. Cook, just stand here slowly, I'll leave first, ha ha ha. Looking at Zoro's leaving back, Sanji could not speak, but his eyes were full of anger. Not to Sha Chen, but to Zoro. This green algae head, when I release the immobilization, I will definitely make you into a sashimi. As time passed, news of Crocodile's defeat spread to all parts of the world. Somewhere in the New World, on the Mobi. Here's the Bailey for today's newspaper. A man with a pineapple head took out a Bailey and handed it to the newspaper bird. Then he slowly opened the newspaper and read it. After a while, a surprised expression appeared on his face. Then he came to a huge man with a white crescent-shaped beard and said, "Dad, Crocodile was defeated by the brother Ace mentioned last time." Huh, the man with white beard showed a curious look. He took the newspaper from Marco's hand and read it. After a while, he suddenly burst into laughter. That sand crocodile guy is really embarrassed. He was defeated by a newcomer who just went to sea. But he is quite courageous. He dares to steal the country. Yes, the newcomers are getting better and better now. I wonder if the 4 emperors will be pulled down. Marco also sighed. La 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 la, are you kidding me, Marco? They just defeated a lost dog, they are still far from it. And even if the 4 emperors are defeated, it won't be lousy. You know, lousy is a white beard. I'm happy today, there's a party. Oh, on another part of the sea, a one-armed man with red hair was also reading a newspaper. A smile appeared on his face. Luffy, you've become stronger. At the same time, people all over the world basically knew the news, and the Straw Hat Pirates truly became famous around the world this time. At this time, in a conference room in Marine Headquarters, Marine Vendor. A group of Marine executives are sitting here, including Fleet Admiral, the 3 generals and most of the lieutenant generals. At this time, everyone was silent and said nothing. Finally, Marine Fleet Admiral Sengoku looked at everyone and said calmly, "Everyone must have more or less news about what is calling everyone here this time. About Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, who stole the country. But the decision in this regard is mainly made by the Holy Land. What we at Marine have to do is..." Having said this, Sengoku took out the heads of the Straw Hats one by one and placed them on the table, and then said slowly. "About this pirate group's bounty. Somewhere on the shore of Alabasta. Lord Sha Chen, how about letting the slave family be your subordinate from now on?" Feng Clay blinked his eyes that made Sha Chen want to vomit and asked Sha Chen. "How many times have I told you, no need?" Sha Chen was a little helpless. If I had known better, I would have just knocked him out and thrown him somewhere. As a result, Feng Clay is now directly entangled with him. He shouted every day that he wanted to be his subordinate. With their current strength, there is no need for him to pretend to be Luffy to attract firepower. Marine or something can just push sideways. Suddenly, Sha Chen thought of a good way to get rid of him, so he smiled and said to him. "Feng Clay, don't you respect the way of the most? I have a place I recommend you to go to. It's called the Kingdom of Monsters, and there's also the King of Monsters there. It's much more meaningful than following me." "Really, there is such a place?" Feng Clay said in surprise. "Yes," Sha Chen nodded, and then continued, "that place is called Peach Island." "Luffy, tell me, will Vivi come at 12 o'clock? Nami asked, looking in the direction of Albana. "I will definitely do it, she is our partner." Luffy nodded and said affirmatively. They gave Vivi a night to think before they left last night, and then made an appointment with her to meet at Eastport at 12 noon today. This would be her last chance if she would come aboard their ship. After some time, Sha Chen looked at everyone and said, "Okay, it's almost time, let's go." "Let's go. Go pick up Vivi," Luffy shouted happily. Oh, meanwhile, a port in Alabasta. There are nearly 10 marine warships staying here. Are you kidding, General Aokiji? Those are extremely vicious pirates. How can you just watch them escape? A woman with pink hair, a graceful figure and a lady's cigarette in her mouth yelled at the phone bug. After listening to the woman's words, Aokiji's voice came over the phone. Tina, there is someone on that ship who is not something you can deal with. If you insist on chasing them, you will be the only one who dies in the end. If we watch the pirates escape from our hands because we are afraid of death, are we worthy of the clothes we are wearing? Tina shouted. General Aokiji, Tina cannot obey this order of yours. Tina will never watch a pirate escape, even if it means giving her life. After saying that, Tina hung up the phone directly. Then he walked out of the cabin and shouted to the marine below, "Everyone, let's go. Go capture the Straw Hat Pirates." At this time, Aokiji, who was far away at the marine headquarters, listened to the beeping sound coming from the phone bug and couldn't help but sigh helplessly. Although he already knew that this was likely to be the result before making the call, and he knew something about Tina's character, but what if? It's a pity that the result still hasn't changed at all. Thinking of this, Aokiji sighed quietly. I hope Sha Chen won't kill me. Aboard the Mary, Sha Chen sat cross-legged on the bow of the boat with his eyes closed, releasing his domineering aura and carefully sensing the surrounding situation. At a certain moment, Sha Chen saw. He saw Luffy trying to pull Usopp's nose, and then Usopp was pulling Luffy's mouth. Sha Chen slowly opened his eyes and looked at Luffy and Usopp on the boat. And the next movements of the two of them were exactly the same as what Sha Chen saw just now. A faint smile appeared on the corner of Sha Chen's mouth. The experience is domineering and advanced. This was the first time that Sha Chen made a breakthrough in domineering without relying on the system, and after the breakthrough, he was able to briefly meet the future. But now he can only predict what will happen in the next few seconds at most, which is still a step behind Kaoru, let alone with red hair. But this is enough for Sha Chen. Hegemony can always be improved by practicing or checking in the future. These are just minor problems. Thinking of this, Sha Chen couldn't help but feel a little proud. It seems that his talent is still very good. But this is also thanks to the battle with Aokiji. Sha Chen discovered that he now also has the characteristics of the protagonist group. After doing sit-ups once, he will master new things and become stronger than before. Hey everyone, Marine is here. Just when Sha Chen was about to take a nap, Sanji shouted. What? Everyone exclaimed in unison and ran to the side of the ship to take a look. They saw that a fleet of nearly 10 ships was heading towards their ship. Then these marine ships shot several huge spikes towards them at the same time. The densely packed huge spikes were reflected in everyone's eyes, and Nami hurriedly shouted, Quick, stop these spikes. No, these attacks are coming from all directions. If you block one side, you won't be able to block the other. Luffy shouted. You don't have to worry about it, I'll do it. Sha Chen stood up from the goat's head and said calmly. Hearing Sha Chen's words, everyone on the boat paused for an instant, and then they didn't even look at the flying spikes. They were doing what they were doing before. It was as if the incoming spike didn't exist. In everyone's perception, as long as Sha Chen says not to worry about it, then don't worry about it. This is the trust they have established in Sha Chen for a long time. There was only one exception. At this time, Robin was a little confused looking at Zoro who had gone back to sleep, Sanji who continued to cook, and Luffy and the others who were playing hard. Then I looked at the confident man on the goat's head, and a strange feeling came over me. She didn't understand why these people could trust this man so much, and murmured to herself, "Is this trust between partners?" Looking at the spikes all over the sky, Sha Chen didn't move at all, just uttered one word lightly. Certainly. As soon as this final word came out, Luffy and the other two people who were playing around below suddenly became excited and had ugly expressions on their faces, as if they were recalling something bad. At the same time, as Dingzi was spitting out, the spikes surrounding him were all still in the air, unable to move even an inch. Then after a while they all fell into the sea. Everyone, so handsome, Luffy and the other two shouted. The scene just now where all the spikes were frozen in the air was too impactful for them. Originally, they thought that Sha Chen would use a more violent method to deal with these spikes, but they didn't expect that it would be enough to just whisper a word from the corner of his mouth. Luffy and others came to Sha Chen's side in an instant, blinking at him with big eyes. Then they all said, Sha Chen, can you teach us this? Sha Chen, this is fruit ability and cannot be taught. Sha Chen said helplessly. Ah, After hearing this, the faces of several people suddenly fell down, looking unhappy. Especially Luffy. He even took out his Nika fruit and scolded him at this time. Finally, he complained. Sometimes the gap between fruits is bigger than the gap between people and dogs. Sha Chen was speechless again. If the 5 old men from the world government knew that you devalued the Nika fruit like this, I wonder if they would come over and strangle you to death. But, Luffy is right, it is indeed incomparable to his fruit. Luffy and the others were a little disappointed at this moment, but some people were scared at this moment. On the marine warship not far from the melee, Privates Hobody and Jangao stared at the scene in front of them with their eyes widened, and even wiped their eyes several times in disbelief. After a long time, he hesitated and said, is this true? Just now they swore that their Black Prison fleet's Black Prison formation was invincible, and there was no ship that they could not capture. But they didn't expect the slap in the face to come so quickly, and in a way that they couldn't accept at all. In all their lives, they have never seen such an exaggerated method. Who is the good guy on the ship who can put so many and big spikes directly in the air? It really blinded their eyes a bit. After a while, Hobody looked tremblingly at Tina next to him and asked, Captain, do we continue to attack? Tina's face was also very ugly at this time. This was the first time she had seen such an unreasonable thing, and she couldn't help but recall what Aokiji said to her this morning. But it didn't take long for the confusion in her eyes to turn into determination, and she said, keep attacking. Tina wants to see how many times they can block it. The word, retreat, has never been in her dictionary. However, the scene that happened next made her heart sink more and more. She saw that all the spikes fired ended up being the same as the first round. First they stood still in midair, and then they all fell into the sea. Hateful. Tina punched the armrest hard. However, the next sound made Tina break into a cold sweat. Captain Tina, why are you so angry? Our ship has been attacked by you so many times and we haven't said anything yet. In an instant, everyone on the boat tensed up and hurriedly looked towards the source of the sound. Sha Chen was seen sitting above the cabin at this time, looking at them indifferently. With just one glance, all Marines felt a pressure acting on themselves, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble. Tina looked at Sha Chen with an ugly face and said word by word, Demon King Sha Chen, the big criminal with a bounty of 800 million. 800 million. A look of surprise flashed across Sha Chen's face. You Marines really think highly of me. You set such a high bounty on me. Let me guess, Uncle Aokiji must be partly responsible for this. It's true of him. Isn't this because Chun Chun doesn't want to make me feel better? It seems that I need to greet him properly next time we meet. Tina did not answer his words, but said as if making an introduction. Demon King Sha Chen has the same form as the Demon King. In this form, his strength will be greatly improved. He has powerful armed domination and good knowledge domineering. Strong fighting ability, mastered many methods, including Marine 6 styles, life return, etc. It is suspected that he has a clone-like ability, and... At this point, Tina paused, then looked into Sha Chen's eyes and said word by word. Seems like it's not affected by Halu Stone. When Tina said this, she carefully observed Sha Chen's expression, trying to find any clues. But unfortunately, she was disappointed. Sha Chen's expression did not change at all from the beginning to the end. Sha Chen looked at Tina with a faint look and said with a smile, Your Marine's intelligence capabilities are indeed good, you know so many things. But I would like to add something to what you said above. Sha Chen stood up and said, I not only have those 2 kinds of domineering, but also Conqueror's domineering. The moment the words fell, a powerful aura emanated from Sha Chen, and the Marines on the ship fell down one after another. In the end, Tina was the only one left on the ship. Tina's face was covered with sweat at this time, and she looked at Sha Chen with shock in her eyes. She really didn't expect that Sha Chen was still the Conqueror's Haki, so it seemed that his danger assessment was going to a higher level. Sha Chen continued, As for me not being affected by Halu Stone, don't you think this is a bit nonsense? Is there any person with fruit abilities in this world who is not affected by the Sea Tower Stone? It's just that you don't know my abilities yet. As for what my ability is, I'll leave it to you to discover later. It is naturally impossible for Sha Chen to admit that he is not restricted by Halu Stone, otherwise there will be endless trouble waiting for him in the future. It is absolutely impossible for the world government to sit idly by with such an existence that breaks common sense. That's why Sha Chen first used Conqueror's domineering power to intimidate Tina, and then explained that it was because of his special abilities. This would increase credibility. Okay, let's not say so much. I'm not here to share information with you this time. If you order Marine to attack our ship again, I will kill you all. As soon as he finished speaking, Conqueror's domineering aura mixed with fierce murderous aura emanated from Sha Chen, heading straight towards Tina. For a moment, Tina felt as if she had entered a world of mountains of corpses and seas of blood, surrounded by corpses, and the strong murderous aura even made her breathless. After a while, Tina was in a trance and found herself on the boat again, but at some point her back was completely soaked, and a large amount of sweat kept dripping from her forehead. The look he looked at Sha Chen was filled with apprehension, and even a hint of fear. Sha Chen looked at her and continued, I know you may not be afraid of death, but if you want these sailors to die with you, just keep trying. Anyway, if I crush you, it will be the same as crushing an ant. That's all, it's up to you to decide what to do. After saying that, Sha Chen was about to return to the melee, but suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and instead of going back, he walked into the cabin. After some time, Sha Chen left the warship carrying a package as big as he didn't know how many people he was, and said with a smile, Captain Tina, look at you, why are you so polite? I came here empty-handed, and you gave me so many things to take back. How embarrassing. But it's hard to refuse your kindness, so I accepted it with a smile. Tina, you really have inherited all the fine traditions of pirates. Sha Chen then visited all the surrounding warships, and then installed them all into the system space. Now that they are no longer in front of Tina, there is no need to worry about being exposed. When Sha Chen finished scanning everything and returned to the melee, he had a smile on his face. What a great harvest! Everyone, come here quickly. Sha Chen shouted to everyone as soon as he returned to the boat. Soon everyone gathered in front of Sha Chen. What's wrong, Sha Chen? Nami asked curiously. I'll show you something good. Sha Chen smiled mysteriously. Good stuff. What good stuff? Luffy stuck his head out and looked at Sha Chen expectantly. Sha Chen did not continue to lie, but took out a stack of reward orders from behind and handed them to everyone. Said, this is the reward order first got from Marine. Each of us has one. What? Everyone exclaimed in unison, but the expressions on their faces were different. Everyone else had happy smiles on their faces, but Usopp and Nami looked hopeless. Usopp asked tremblingly, Sha Chen, is this the good thing you said? Yeah, what's wrong? Sha Chen asked, pretending not to know anything. No, nothing. Usopp tried his best to look calm on the surface, but his trembling feet still betrayed him. For the current Usopp, his first reaction when he found out that he was being rewarded was that it was over. In this way, he would become a wanted criminal in the future, and a bunch of bounty hunters would want to come and take his head. Of course, Nami had the same idea. On the other hand, the other four next to them were excited at this time. Oh, 120 million Baileys, ha ha ha. That's almost a 5-fold increase. Luffy laughed happily while holding his bounty. Oh, it's only 80 million Baileys. It's not bad. Zoro looked at his reward order and said calmly, but the corners of his raised mouth did not look very calm. After reading his reward order, Zoro couldn't help but stretched his head over to Sanji next to him. When he saw the 60 million belly shining on it, Zoro's smile became even bigger. Pretending to be a strong man, he said to Sanji, 60 million belly. Not bad. Keep working hard. However, when Zoro saw Marine's name for Sanji in the bounty order, his strong expression instantly became unbearable. Ha ha ha. Zoro held his stomach and laughed hard, which made Zoro, the most hilarious person in the Straw Hats, laugh like this. You can imagine what interesting things he saw. This scene first caught the attention of Luffy next to him. He couldn't help looking at Zoro curiously and asked, what's wrong, Zoro? You, look, Sanji's name, Zoro said while laughing. Sha Chen was really afraid that he would choke himself to death while laughing. As for why Zoro smiled, Sha Chen also knew because he also saw it. What? Luffy also looked over curiously. Ha ha ha. The next second, Luffy lay directly on the ground, holding his stomach and laughing, even more exaggerated than Zoro. Demon Sanji, ha ha ha. Sanji, your title is so domineering. Ha ha ha. Ha, what's wrong? Hearing the laughter around him, Chopper looked up sadly. Because his bounty is only 50 Baileys, and he is called pet. A civet cat can tolerate a reindeer but not a reindeer. How is he a pet? He is obviously also a combatant on the ship, okay. However, when he glanced over to see Sanji's reward notice, his sadness disappeared in an instant. The laughing duo became a laughing trio. Only Sanji's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot, and his eyes were about to burst into flames when he looked at his bounty. If he knew who named the reward, he would chop him into pieces. He said it. Especially when he saw the 3 people in front of him who were laughing at him, he became even more angry. Then, he kicked Zoro. Devil, are you looking for death? Green algae head, if you say that name again today, I will kill you. TCH, the pervert is not allowed to talk anymore. Once this reward order is issued, the whole world will know that you are a pervert. Why do you need me to tell you? Zoro curled his lips disdainfully. After hearing this, Sanji's expression froze, his legs were weak and he fell to his knees. His shattered reputation. Luffy and the other 3 finally stopped after laughing for a while, but the occasional shrug of their shoulders still proved the lingering power of this title. But at this time, Luffy discovered something. Usopp, who usually had fun with them when encountering such things, was now looking down at his bounty order without saying a word. The same goes for Nami next to her. Seeing this, Luffy couldn't help but walked over curiously and asked, Usopp, what's wrong with you? Why don't you go and smile at Sanji? He is called a pervert. Sanji jumped up from the ground and rushed towards Luffy. Luffy, I'm going to kill you. However, even in this situation, Usopp remained motionless. After a while, he quietly said, I have no problem with the 20 million bounty, but why? Marine calls me Hammer Liar. At this time, Nami next to her also slowly said, I also want to ask this question, why is mine called an acrobatic girl? Then the 2 of them shouted angrily at the same time, Marine's people are sick. This voice immediately confused everyone present, and then everyone looked over curiously, and then Luffy laughed again. The Hammer Liar, the acrobatic girl, the pervert. Ha ha ha. Why do you 3 have such names? Ha ha ha. Bang bang bang. I'm so sorry. Luffy apologized to the 3 of them with his head full. Zoro and Chopper next to them covered their mouths tightly, fearing that they would laugh out loud, otherwise they would get beaten. Even Robin, who never smiled very much, couldn't help but smile after hearing these weird titles. After some time, everyone finally stopped making noise, and Luffy was counting on his fingers. Everyone on our ship has a bounty now. Mine is 120 million, Zoro's 80 million, Robin's 79 million, Sanji's 60 million, Usopp's 20 million, Nami 15 million. And Chopper's 50 Baileys. Chopper. Actually, I don't need to say it out loud. The bounty for all of us now is 374 million and 50 belly. By the way, there's Sha Chen too. Sha Chen, how much is your bounty? Luffy turned to look at Sha Chen and asked. See for yourselves. Sha Chen handed his reward order to everyone. Exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark. 800 million Baileys. Why are yours so high? Luffy asked dissatisfied. Originally, he thought that after raising the bounty, he would be able to get closer to Sha Chen, but he didn't expect that he would get further and further away. Isn't this normal? Do you think I'm with Aokiji White Hits? Sha Chen said lightly. Then my thoughts started to drift away. He murmured to himself. 374 million and 50 belly. It's much higher than this period in the original work. Sha Chen also didn't expect that in the original book, Luffy only needed 100 million belly to solve Crocodile by himself, but now that the 3 of them solved it together, the reward was even higher. It seems that many things have changed now. What will happen in the future? Sha Chen suddenly became a little worried about the uncertain future. But when Sha Chen turned to look at Luffy and the others, all of Sha Chen's thoughts disappeared. No matter what the future holds, they are getting better and better, and that is enough. Hey, Luffy, it's already 12 o'clock. Sha Chen looked at Luffy and said. You also heard Vivi's speech just now, so you understand what's going on. Zoro also said. Luffy turned his head and asked, "What do you mean?" "It means Miss Vivi won't be coming. She just said goodbye to us." Sanji slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. "Impossible, Vivi will definitely come." Luffy still didn't believe this fact and said stiffly. "Hey." Everyone couldn't help but sigh when they saw this scene. Why don't they want Vivi to come on board? They have become accustomed to Vivi's existence after living for so long. Everyone. Just when everyone was emo, a familiar shout came from the shore. In an instant, everyone turned their heads in surprise. "Vivi, you're here." Luffy first shouted loudly towards Vivi, then turned to look at everyone. "I just said Vivi will come. Hee hee." However, Vivi's next words made everyone's faces freeze with joy. "Everyone, I'm here to say goodbye to you. I am very happy to be with you during this period of time. I have never been so happy. But, I still like this country very much. Everything I love is here, so I can't continue traveling with you. Thank you for your continued care. Thank you very much during this time." When she said this, Vivi burst into tears and burst into tears. "Vivi," Luffy murmured, "next time we meet again, are you still willing to call me partner?" Woohoo. When everyone heard this, they were silent for a while, and then shouted loudly, "It will definitely happen." Then Luffy stood on the fence and shouted, "Vivi, you will become a good princess, goodbye." "Goodbye, Vivi." Everyone waved and shouted, looking at the melee drifting away, and thinking of the time they spent together these days, tears welled up uncontrollably on Vivi's face again. "Goodbye, everyone." Vivi stood there for a long time watching the melee disappear from her sight. Then he turned to look at the duck next to him. "Run fast, let's go back." "Gah, dot, hey, it's so boring." Everyone on the melee was stuffed into the gaps in the railings, looking listless. Watching this scene, Zoro asked a little speechlessly, "What are you doing? If you don't want to let Vivi go, just drag her onto the boat." Unexpectedly, as soon as Zoro said this, he immediately made people angry. "You are not human. You have no heart. You are so cold. Green algae head. Dot." Listening to these accusations, Zoro couldn't help but have veins popping up on his forehead, and he had the urge to hit these people. Robin, who was reading a book on the side, couldn't help but chuckle when he saw this scene. Zoro didn't take action in the end, he had no choice, even the three-sword style couldn't beat 10 hands. After making a cut sound, Zoro walked to the bow of the ship and asked Sha Chen, who was lying on the bow, "General Marine, is he very strong?" "Huh." Sha Chen opened his eyes and glanced at Zoro doubtfully. He didn't expect Zoro to come over and ask him this. Sha Chen sat up and stared into Zoro's eyes. In Zoro's eyes, he saw ambition, the ambition to become a strong man. Sha Chen couldn't help but chuckle. It seems that Zoro is the most motivated on the ship. Then Sha Chen turned to look at the sea and said, "Very strong. I can't describe how strong it is. Anyway, he is on the same level as Eagle Eye. If you have faced Hawkeye before, you should know how powerful he is." "As strong as Hawkeye," Zoro murmured softly. Then a glimmer of excitement flashed in his eyes. There were so many strong men on the sea, which made his blood boil. No, he has to train. He wants to become strong. Thinking of this, Zoro said hello to Sha Chen, walked aside, picked up his dumbbells and started swinging. Looking at this scene, Sha Chen couldn't help but nodded slightly. Suoda is self-disciplined. It's just that. You can't defeat Guadi even if you try hard. Sleep. A few days later, Luffy, Usopp, Chopper, did you catch anything good? Sha Chen walked to the three of them and asked them. Although they said they were not short of food now, to be honest, they ate these every day, and now Sha Chen felt a little nauseous when he saw the dinosaur meat. Not yet. These fish are too smart, they won't even take the bait. Luffy couldn't help complaining. However, at this moment, Usopp seemed to have caught something, and his face suddenly turned red. "I caught something, big stuff. Come and help me." Oh, Luffy and Chopper looked excited and came to Usopp's side to help him pull up the things. 1, 2, come up. Following the shouts of everyone, a huge conch was pulled up by them. Wow, what a big conch! Chopper shouted in surprise. It should be delicious if it's so big, right? Luffy couldn't help drooling as he looked at this conch. It would taste good to make grilled conch. Sanji said, touching his chin. Isn't it? Do you want to eat this weird conch? Usopp swallowed. At this moment, the middle of the conch opened and a man came out. Everyone. After coming out, the man touched his head and said, "It was so dangerous. I thought I was dead this time." "Who are you?" Luffy asked. "Ha ha ha, let me introduce myself. I am the little ladybug mail-order less who can be at your doorstep with just a phone call and deliver products to you. To express my gratitude to you, I will give you a discount on all the products here today. I'm not bragging, our company sells everything from mineral water to artillery shells, everything you need." Speaking of this, Les had a proud expression on his face. "Can I buy some paper?" Nami suddenly came over and asked. "It's the kind of paper that's so big and tough that it won't rot even if it's blown by the sea breeze." "Of course, please take a look." As he spoke, Leslie took out a stack of paper from the conch and proudly introduced, "This is the most advanced Millennium paper that Little Ladybug Mail Order is proud of. 1,000-year paper. It sounds very advanced," Luffy said excitedly. "Of course, this is 1,000-year paper made of 1,000-year-old fir trees. It will not fade even if it is exposed to the sun for 1,000 years." "How much?" Nami asked excitedly. Seeing this situation, Leslie showed a sinister expression on his face, and then said in embarrassment, "This is not easy to handle. This paper is very precious. No matter how much it is, I will pay it. You tell me a price." As soon as Nami said this, everyone on the boat looked at her in shock, completely unable to believe that this sentence came out of Nami's mouth. Is this still the same Nami they knew with no money left? If that's the case, then I'll reluctantly sell it to you. I'll charge you 48 million Baileys for 1,000 pieces. 2 million. Nami slashed directly into the aorta. 4.8 million. Leslie continued to return the offer. Just when Nami wanted to continue bargaining, Sha-Chen came out, stopped her, and said lightly, "Let me do it." Nami was a little surprised when he heard this. In his impression, Sha-Chen didn't seem like someone who could bargain. Sha-Chen came to Les, looked at him and said, "Take out everything in your conch, I want it all." Everyone. Sha-Chen, there's no need. We don't need many things. Nami became anxious instantly. If it weren't for Sha-Chen who said this, she would have punched anyone else. Sha-Chen did not answer, but continued to look at Les. When Les saw this situation, he felt happy instantly. He had met a fat sheep. Then Pidion took out all the things from the conch, and the things were piled all over the floor. Sha-Chen looked at these things and was a little curious about how his conch packed so many things. After taking inventory, Les said, "God, the total price of these things is 700 million belly. You see." After speaking, he rubbed his hands and looked at Sha-Chen with excitement. 7 billion Baileys. Everyone's eyes widened when they heard this figure. They had never seen so much money in their lives. Even if all of them except Sha-Chen were exchanged for the reward, it would not be enough, it would have to be doubled again. However, Sha-Chen at this time replied calmly, "Okay." Then he made a move to go back to the cabin to get the money, but when he turned around, a reward notice accidentally fell down and landed in front of Les. Leslie glanced curiously at first, and then he was sweating profusely. Then he raised his head and glanced at Sha-Chen. He was sweating even more, and even his legs were trembling. At this time, Sha-Chen picked up the reward order and pretended to be embarrassed and said, "Hey, I accidentally dropped the thing, I'm so sorry. I almost want to throw this away. Didn't I just kill all the people on that island when I met a profiteer when I was buying something on that island? It's true that Marine is making such a fuss and offering me such a high reward. Mr. Leslie, do you think so? Do you think it's too much for me to kill the entire island because of a profiteer? I don't think it's too much at all." After listening to Sha-Chen's words, Les became even more panicked. Just now his legs were trembling, but now his whole body was trembling. He stammered, "1 is not too much at all. I suddenly remembered that I still have something to do, so I will give these things to you, Mr. Sha-Chen. Goodbye." After saying that, Leslie got into the conch with lightning speed, then jumped into the sea and ran away. Looking at Les leaving, Sha-Chen had a smile on his lips and turned to look at everyone. Done. However, at this time, everyone on the boat was stunned. This wave of operations is worth learning throughout their lives. Luffy couldn't help but take out his reward ticket and said thoughtfully. It turns out that this reward order can still be used in this way. A few days flew by. Sha Chen is still sitting on his exclusive throne at this time, drinking the fruit tea just made by Sanji, and his life is not too moist. Suddenly, Sha Chen narrowed his eyes, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Then 2 fingers stretched towards his left side. Clang! The sound of gold and iron clashing came, and Sha Chen's fingers were firmly holding a knife that was coming towards him. Okay, Zoro, when did you master the weapon color? Just now. Zoro's faint voice came, with excitement in his tone. However, when Sha Chen heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched and he said helplessly. Then you are so kind to me. As soon as you master the weapon colors, you use me to test the sword. And you always use a sneak attack. I'm helping you train your senses, what do you know? Zoro replied. Sha Chen was speechless for a moment. What Zoro said is true. With him making sneak attacks every day, Sha Chen really felt that his knowledge and appearance had been slightly improved. Although it is only a tiny bit, mosquito legs are still meat no matter how small they are. Add up to a small amount. By the way, why can't I break your defense even when I have mastered Haki? Zoro asked doubtfully. Hearing this, Sha Chen immediately rolled his eyes at Zoro and said rudely, you want to go to heaven? How long will it take for you to master your domineering power and break my defense? Let's wait until you practice for another 10 or 8 years before we talk. Sha Chen replied calmly, and then his palm suddenly appeared in front of Zoro's face and slapped him. Upon seeing this, Zoro's pupils shrank and he immediately held the knife in front of him. A large number of sparks were generated the moment the palm came into contact with the knife, and then Zoro was shot out and fell to the deck below before he could hold on for half a second. After finishing all this, Sha Chen picked up the fruit tea and took a sip, then lay down and basked in the sun. However, Sha Chen felt his eyes darken before he had been out in the sun for long, and he couldn't help but open his eyes curiously. What came into view was a huge ship falling directly from the sky. This scene shocked Sha Chen directly. At the same time, other people on the boat also noticed that the sky was darkening and couldn't help but look up. Ah! The boat fell from the sky. Chopper shouted loudly with his eyes widened. Idiot, how could the ship fall from the sky? Sanji, who had just walked out of the cabin, couldn't help but sneered when he heard this. But when he looked up too, the boat really fell from the sky. After being stunned for a while, Sha Chen finally reacted. Certainly, as the word, ding, was spoken, the huge ship floated in the air, including the tiny wood chips around the hull. Not to mention, as soon as he opened his eyes, he suddenly saw a ship coming towards him. Even though he thought he had experienced strong winds and waves, he was shocked. Wow, Sha Chen, your body holding technique is really amazing. You can hold such a big ship in place. Low-key, these are just tricks, Sha Chen said pretentiously. After everyone was amazed for a while, they also thought of a question. By the way, why did the ship fall from the sky? Luffy asked, looking at the sky curiously. This sea area is really strange, and my record pointer is broken. It keeps pointing to the sky. Nami also interjected at this time. Maybe it's not that the record pointer is broken, but it might be pointing to an island in the sky, which is the so-called empty island. Robin came over and said calmly. Sky Island. Luffy instantly showed an excited expression when he heard this. Islands floating in the sky. Sounds so interesting. Strictly speaking, it's not the island floating in the sky, but the sea floating in the sky. The sea is floating in the sky. Luffy became even more excited after hearing this, and shouted directly to Nami, Nami, let's go to Sky Island. Idiot, the sea floating in the sky. Are you mentally ill? How is this possible? Nami said speechlessly. That's not what you said, Miss Navigator. In this sea area, you don't have to believe in all common sense, but the only thing you have to believe in is the record pointer in your hand. The reason why it appears like this now is probably because it is attracted by the magnetic force of the empty island. Yes, empty islands do exist. Sha Chen also interrupted at this time. For a moment, everyone looked at him, and then Luffy happily shouted, okay, Sky Island. Sky Island. Nami also asked Sha Chen at this time, How to get to Kong Island? Well, I don't know much about this, but we can look for clues, such as the ship above our head. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.